The morning sun came over the line of the Hampshire Downs at 20 minutes past 7 on the cold, pale blue Wednesday morning of the 5th of March, 1817, and the first long shaft of it fell, as it had fallen each cloudless morning of that month, upon the embroidered south-facing window-seat cushion of the great library at Ravenshaw Park. Upon the cushion, in her habitual neat-furled compose, lay the tortoise-shell cat. Her name had been Persimmon since her kittenhood. She was 11 this Lady Day. Her warm ginger and black patches were folded under her creamy white underside, her white paws tucked one over the other, her white-tipped tail laid in a soft comma about her flank. The two small notched ears moved once at a wood-pigeon in the cedar beyond, and were still again. Her round amber-yellow eyes were closed. The cushion was old. The silk had been embroidered by the late Duchess in 1791. Pale yellow primroses and dark blue forget-me-nots upon a pale cream silk ground, pressed flat by the long sleepings of the cat. Beyond the window-seat, the high oak shelves rose to the moulded plaster ceiling, and the pale grey morning light had begun to find the leather backs of the books. The hearth was unlit, the iron fire-dogs cold. Drawn close to it stood a great empty wing-chair, and laid upon its right arm, boards downward, was a small cloth-bound book, Mrs. Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho, halted at chapter 14 on the 2nd of February. The library held the small composed silence of an arrangement that the absent had set out, and the absent had not yet returned to disturb. Then, at 23 minutes past 7, on the soft tread of indoor slippers upon the polished oak of the corridor without, Lady Letitia Vance came in. She came in quietly and closed the door behind her, with the small habitual care of one who had learnt for 21 months not to wake the cat. She was 24 years of age this last Lady Day, slender, upright, 5 feet 4 inches in her plain black leather indoor slippers. Her long, rich auburn chestnut wavy hair, deep, warm chestnut with copper lights and firelight, was pinned smooth in a low chignon at the nape of her long, graceful neck, with a small wisp or two escaped at the temples. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes, warm, autumn-leaf brown with green flecks, very steady in their direct gaze, set under finely arched, dark honey-brown brows and fringed with thick, dark lashes, moved gently over the empty room and rested at the hearth a moment and turned away. Her ivory fair English skin held a faint, warm rose flush across the cheekbones, and a faint scattering of small freckles lay across the bridge of her nose, and below the right corner of her soft, well-shaped mouth she wore the small, natural beauty mark that was the only mark her face had ever had. Her oval face was of delicate, fine features and quiet composure. She had on her plain, high-waisted, soft, pale grey wool morning gown, with long sleeves and a white lawn fichu pinned at her throat, the grey gown being the half-tone of mourning, proper to a paid companion who had lost her employer, and the small silver locket on a thin black silk ribbon at her neck, containing a curl of her late mother's hair, lay quiet upon the white lawn. Her stockings were plain black wool. On her left arm she carried a small mending basket of white linen, and over her shoulders she had a soft grey wool shawl, which she now took off and hung neatly upon the chair-back beside the door. She crossed to the hearth in the same soft tread, stood a moment beside the empty wing-chair, with her hands held very still before her, and then, with the small, courteous inclination of the head she had always paid to that chair when it had been occupied, crossed to the smaller wing-chair on the opposite side of the unlit hearth, set down her mending basket upon the rug, and seated herself upright in her usual place. Persimmon opened one round amber-yellow eye, considered her gravely for a single breath, closed the eye again, and tucked her white-tipped tail 1/4 of an inch closer about her flank. Letitia took up the small cloth-bound Mysteries of Udolpho from the arm of the empty chair opposite. She turned it in her hands a moment, as one turns a letter from the dead, opened it at the marked place at chapter 14, smoothed the page with 2 fingers in the manner the dowager had liked, and began, in her soft, warm, low alto, to read aloud. She read to the empty wing chair as she had read to it for 21 months when it had not been empty, with the small, quiet authority of an eldest daughter who had been practiced at reading aloud since her childhood. The cat blinked at the first phrase, settled the white-tipped tail, and listened with closed eyes. Letitia read 2 pages, the passage of the moonlit ramparts that the dowager had loved, and at the proper line she closed the book gently, laid it boards downward upon the arm of her own chair this time, and sat for the space of 3 slow breaths with her hands folded in her lap. She did not weep. She had done her weeping in the 24 days since the 2nd of February. She drew towards her the small writing table at her elbow, took up a sheet of cream-laid paper and a sharp pencil from the porcelain tray beside the inkstand, settled the paper upon her knee, and began quietly to draft, in her even, composed hand, the next of the parish letters of recommendation she had been writing on the dowager's behalf for the dowager's other companion women. There had been 3 of them besides herself: Miss Croft, pensioned to her sister at Bath; Miss Pike, going to her brother's parsonage at Lymington; and old Miss Harbury, who had been with the dowager longest and was now in want of a quieter post. It had been the dowager's own intention to write each of these letters herself, and she had not lived to do it. Letitia had taken up the office on the 3rd of February. She had nearly finished Miss Harbury's now. While she wrote, the slow grey of the morning warmed by small degrees into the proper quiet light of a March forenoon. Persimmon slept on. She had been thinking, as the pencil moved, of the long shape of the years that had brought her to this morning. Her mother, the late Countess Vance, had died in childbed at Vance Court in Sussex in 1797, when Letitia had been 4 years old. Letitia had been raised at Vance Court by her father, the 9th Earl of Vance, a quiet, learned country gentleman, and by an old governess who had taught her her French, her music, her plain sewing, and her steady reading aloud. He had died of a pleurisy in November of 1814, with Letitia at his side, and there had been no son. The earldom and Vance Court had gone, under the strict entail laid upon them in the 7th Earl's time, to a distant 3rd cousin of the line, Lord Demetrius Vance, of whom Letitia had not heard since her 17th year, and who had not invited her to remain. Her father had left her, by his will, the sum of £100 a year drawn upon the 3 per cents, and the small set of pearls her mother had left her upon dying. She had taken the pearls and the 100 a year, and in early 1815 she had taken her first paid post as companion to an elderly Dorset widow. In March of 1815 she had come to Ravenshaw Park on the recommendation of Lady Helena Bramwell, the dowager's married daughter, who had been at school with the dowager's old companion, Miss Harbury. The dowager had received Letitia in this very library, had asked her to read aloud a paragraph from Cowper's Task, and had said, with the small, grave kindness Letitia would learn to know, "Yes, my dear, I think you and I shall do very well." For 21 months Letitia had read to the dowager every morning at 11 and every evening after dinner, save on the Sundays when they had heard the Reverend Yates read in the parish church. The dowager had died in her sleep on the night of the 2nd of February, 1817, with Letitia in the chair beside her bed, reading aloud the 73rd sermon of Bishop Berkeley, the dowager's particular favourite, upon the small, steady patience of Providence, and at the proper line, the dowager's small dry hand upon the silk coverlet had ceased its quiet rise and fall, and Letitia had read the sentence out to its close, and had closed the book, and had drawn the silk coverlet a little higher about the dowager's shoulders, and had risen and gone quietly to the bell-pull, and had called Mr. Bartlett. There had been 24 days of household mourning since, and then, by the Morning Post on Tuesday the 4th of March, there had come Mr. Tyndall's letter. At 9:30, with the slow, precise tread of one who had walked the corridors of Ravenshaw Park for 28 years, Mrs. Crouch came to the library door and tapped once and entered. Mrs. Crouch was 58 years of age. Her iron-grey hair was pinned in a tight low bun beneath a small white linen housekeeper's cap. Her sharp, pale grey eyes were set in a narrow indoor face, gone slightly sallow from her many years within doors. Her narrow lips were habitually pressed thin. She stood 5 feet 5 inches and was thin and very upright. She had on her plain dark bombazine housekeeper's gown, with long sleeves and high round neck, a fresh white linen apron tied at the waist, the chatelaine of household keys at her belt, plain black wool stockings, plain black leather indoor shoes, and the small black silk mourning band that all the upper servants of Ravenshaw had worn upon the left arm since the 3rd of February. In her right hand she carried a small black japanned tray, and upon the tray, folded once and laid square to the tray's edge, was a letter sealed with the unbroken red wafer of Lincoln's Inn. "Your letter, my lady," said Mrs. Crouch, in her dry, civil voice, and offered the tray. Letitia laid down her pencil, rose with the small, composed deliberation she always rose with, said, "I thank you, Mrs. Crouch," in her soft, warm, low alto, and took the letter from the tray. She broke the wafer with her thumb. She unfolded the single sheet. She read it through once in steady quiet, and then she read it through a second time at the same pace. The letter had been written upon a sheet of good cream foolscap in the steady close hand of a clerk, signed at the foot by Mr. Tyndall in his own narrower hand, and dated the 28th of February, 1817, at Lincoln's Inn. It informed Lady Letitia Vance, in the proper formula of His Grace's solicitors, that upon a clerical review of the late Dowager Duchess of Ravenshaw's household account schedule, the post of reader to the Dowager had been entered as terminated upon the date of her Grace's death, that her ladyship's quarter's wages would be paid in full to Lady Day next, that her ladyship was requested to vacate her quarters at the Park by the last day of March 1817, and that the present Duke of Ravenshaw was expected at the Park upon Tuesday the 11th of March, and trusted she would have made her arrangements accordingly. The letter remained the obedient servant of her ladyship, etc., Henry Tyndall, junior partner. Letitia folded the letter once along its first crease, and once again along its second, and laid it quietly upon the small writing table at her elbow. She did not sit down. She turned, with her hands held very still before her, to Mrs. Crouch. "I thank you, Mrs. Crouch," she said again, and the soft, warm, low alto did not tremble. "I am much obliged to you for bringing it. I shall of course be ready upon the day. May I ask one small civility of the household, that I be permitted until the last day of March to use the South Library in the mornings, that I may finish the parish letters of recommendation which the Dowager had wished written for the other ladies of her companion circle. It is the work of perhaps a week." Mrs. Crouch held her sharp, pale grey eyes steadily upon her ladyship's face for the space of 2 breaths, and then inclined her iron-grey head 1/4 of an inch. "The South Library, my lady," she said, with the thin civility her 28 years of service had taught her never to vary, "is at your disposal until His Grace arrives upon the 11th. After that day, His Grace will dispose of it himself. You are very good, Mrs. Crouch." "My lady." Mrs. Crouch turned upon her plain black indoor shoes, carried the small black japanned tray at the same level, and withdrew. The library door closed behind her with a small dry click. Letitia stood a long, quiet moment in the centre of the worn Turkey rug. She looked at the empty wing chair across the unlit hearth. She looked at the embroidered cushion of the south window seat, where Persimmon had now lifted her head and was watching her with the round amber-yellow eyes wide open. She crossed back to her own smaller wing chair, drew her grey wool skirts smooth beneath her, sat down again upright, took up her pencil from the cream paper, and resumed Miss Harbury's parish letter at the precise word at which she had laid the pencil down. Her hand was entirely level. Persimmon, after a further short consideration, came down from the cushion in 2 soft jumps, padded across the rug, leaped lightly into Letitia's lap, turned twice, and settled with the white-tipped tail laid in a comma about her flank. The morning passed in the small, steady scratch of pencil upon paper and the small, soft sound of a cat breathing. At 3 o'clock, Letitia laid down her pencil, rose with the cat under her arm, set Persimmon upon the warm hearth-rug, for Mr. Bartlett had sent up the small parlour-maid at 12 to lay the fire, and the fire now burned low and steady in the iron grate, and went down by the back stair to the kitchens. She had made it her habit, in the 24 days, to read for half an hour in the kitchen at 3, to Mrs. Doddington the cook, who had loved the dowager. Mrs. Doddington was 54 years of age. Her soft, grey-brown hair was pinned beneath a large white linen cap. Her warm, pale blue eyes were set in a fair, pink-cheeked, round face. Her mouth was a kindly mouth. She stood 5 feet 5 inches and was of plump, comfortable build. She had on her plain, dark blue print cotton cook's gown beneath a large, fresh white linen apron, with a white kerchief at her throat. She was rolling out a short paste at the long deal table when Letitia came in. She looked up at her ladyship's face once, and the rolling-pin paused. "My dear," said Mrs. Doddington. "You have heard," said Letitia gently. "Susanna told me at dinner. The poor lamb. It is a great wickedness, my lady, and a great folly that they should send you away." Mrs. Doddington laid the rolling-pin down very precisely, lifted the corner of her white linen apron, pressed it once to each pale blue eye, and let it fall again. She did not weep more than that one time. Letitia crossed the flagged floor and took Mrs. Doddington's flowery hand in both her own. "Mr. Tyndall has, I think, made an error of paper only," she said, in the soft, warm, low alto. "He cannot have known how my dear Duchess would have wished it. I shall not blame him for not knowing what was not written. You shall always have a place at this kitchen door, my lady," said Mrs. Doddington stoutly, and squeezed her hand. Letitia smiled, for the first time that day, the small, composed, grateful smile that had moved her soft, well-shaped mouth a 1/4 of an inch only, and left her steady, hazel-brown eyes warm. She drew up the small kitchen stool, opened The Mysteries of Udolpho at the place she had marked that morning, and read for a half-hour in the soft, warm, low alto, while Mrs. Doddington rolled the short paste and the kitchen maid scoured a copper pan in the scullery beyond. She returned to the library at 4, read out one of her finished parish letters for the last revision, closed the inkstand, and took her supper in her own room on a small tray at 7:30. At 8 in the evening, Susanna Wilkes came up to the east wing bedchamber with the supper tray. Susanna was 19 years of age. Her soft mid-brown hair was pinned in a neat low bun beneath a small white lace cap. Her clear hazel eyes were set in a fair, lightly freckled oval face with a kind, quiet mouth. She stood 5 feet 3 inches and was slender and upright. She had on her plain, dark grey print cotton lady's maid gown, a fresh white linen apron and fichu, plain black leather slippers, and the small jet cross on a black silk cord she had worn at her throat since her grandmother had died in the autumn. She set the tray down upon the small round table by the window, turned, saw her mistress's face in the candlelight, and stopped. "My lady, Susanna, dear, sit down." Susanna sat down, very straight, on the edge of the upright chair beside the table. Letitia told her, in the steady, soft, warm, low alto, the contents of the letter. Susanna's clear hazel eyes filled. The tears came down her freckled cheeks without sound, and she pressed her white linen apron once against her mouth and made no other complaint. "Hush, my dear," said Letitia, and crossed the carpet and knelt down beside the chair and took Susanna's 2 cold hands in her own. "Hush, it is nothing very dreadful. I am quite well. I shall write tonight to a connection at Cheltenham, and I shall have a place again by May. You have a place here as long as you wish. My lady, I cannot bear it. You shall bear it very well, Susanna, because I shall need you to. Now, listen. I have something for you which I should have given you days ago, only Mr. Bartlett and I had agreed it should wait until the funeral month was out." She rose, crossed to her own small mahogany writing desk, drew out the shallow upper drawer, and lifted out a small flat paper-wrapped parcel, tied with a thin black silk thread. She brought it back to Susanna and laid it upon the girl's apron lap. "Her Grace left these to you by codicil," she said gently. "She had the codicil made out by Mr. Tyndall in the autumn. She asked me to be sure they came to you. They are her small pearl drop earrings, the pair you used to fasten for her at evening. She said you had the kindest hands of any girl she had ever had to dress her, and that you should have them after her." Susanna pulled gently at the black silk thread. The paper opened. The 2 small pearl drops, set in their fine pale gold wires, lay quiet upon the white tissue. Susanna looked at them a long moment, and then at Letitia, and then she put her face down into her white linen apron and wept properly, with the small, steady weeping of a young girl of 19 who has been loved by a great kind lady. Letitia put her arm about her shoulders and held her quietly until she was done. When Susanna had risen, washed her face at the little stand, pinned her cap straight, set the supper tray properly at her mistress's elbow, and been dismissed with a small kiss upon the cheek, Letitia sat at her own small mahogany writing desk by the east window, drew toward her a sheet of cream-laid paper, dipped the steel pen, and at 10:30 that night, with the candle on her desk burning steady in its plain pewter candlestick, began her letter to Mrs. Frances Lambourne, an elderly cousin of her father's old governess at the Crescent in Cheltenham, asking after companion posts beginning in May. The pen moved on, in the same even composed hand the parish letters had been written in. Persimmon had come up the back stair behind Susanna and was asleep at Letitia's slippered feet, the white-tipped tail across one black leather instep. The candle did not gutter. The house was very quiet. Outside the east window, a single wood pigeon in the dark cedar gave its soft, late note, and Persimmon lifted her tortoise-shell head once, with the round, amber-yellow eyes wide and listening, and laid it down again. Letitia set the steel pen down upon the small enamel pen tray painted with violets that the dowager had given her, and looked a moment at the steady candle flame. She had been, she thought, in her 21 months at Ravenshaw Park, happier than she had been in the 7 years preceding, and she would be quietly grateful for the rest of her life that her dear Duchess had been the one to lift her into the small house of warmth. The candle in Letitia's small northeast bedroom burned steadily down through the late hours of that cold, pale Wednesday night of the 5th of March, and when at last she sealed the letter to her distant Cheltenham connection and laid it upon the corner of her writing desk, the striking clock told 11:15, and the tortoise-shell cat, who had followed her up at the close of the day, was already asleep in a warm coil at her feet, 2 notched ears folded close, large amber-yellow eyes shut. Letitia, in her plain pale grey wool, with the white lawn fichu at her throat and the small silver locket on its black silk ribbon, sat a moment longer with her slender hands very still. Then she rose and slept in steady silence until the cold, pale blue light of Thursday morning came in at 7:20, and the cat asked to be let out into the day. Thursday, the 6th of March, passed exactly as the days had passed for 21 months. At 8:30, Letitia came down in her plain pale grey wool, Her auburn chestnut hair pinned smooth in the low chignon, at the nape with the small wisps escaped at the temples, the cat at her heel. She went to the South Library, opened the shutters upon the cold, pale blue Hampshire morning, and sat down in the wing chair beside the cold grate, with the dowager's small, calf-bound Hamlet upon her lap. She read aloud, in her soft, warm, low alto, to the empty wing chair opposite her. For it was the manner in which the dowager had heard her read, and she had not the heart to alter it, merely because the chair had been 4 weeks empty. The cat lay upon the embroidered, south-facing window-seat cushion in the long shaft of pale blue morning light. At 10, she went to the small South housekeeper's office and continued the parish letters of recommendation in her small, even hand on the dowager's stationery, with its raven and wheat sheaf crest. Afterwards, she walked alone for 45 minutes in the south garden between the box hedges, the cat at her heel, stopping to sniff the early crocus. At 3, she sat for half an hour with Mrs. Doddington over tea and seed cake. Mrs. Doddington, her warm, pale blue eyes beneath the large white linen cap, spoke of her late mistress as one who has lost a sister and is determined to bear it. Letitia listened, hands folded composedly, and gave back what comfort she could give. So passed Thursday and Friday morning, and on Friday afternoon, the 7th of March, at 3, the parish vicar of Ravenshaw came down the long beech avenue in his small black gig, and Mr. Bartlett showed him into the morning room, where Letitia came down to him. The Reverend Yates was 56 that spring. His soft, sandy grey hair was finely thinning at the crown. His clear, honest hazel eyes looked steadily through small, gold-rimmed spectacles. His fair, gently weathered skin was clean-shaven over the long, kind face. His medium, 5'10" frame was thin and a little stooped beneath the black cassock with its white linen surplice, the white collar band at his throat, the small silver crucifix on its black silk cord resting upon his breast. He had married Adrian's parents in 1782, baptized Adrian and Helena, and buried the late Duchess in February. He came now in steady kindness, because Mr. Bartlett had said a quiet word to him after the Sunday service. He took the chair Letitia offered, declined tea, and came directly to the matter. "Lady Letitia," he said in his quiet, kind voice, "Mr. Bartlett has told me of the letter from Lincoln's Inn, the parish has set aside, of the late Duchess's own annuity to the village poor, a stipend of £40 a year for a reader who would go thrice in the week to the cottages of the elderly and bedridden of Ravenshaw, Mrs. Pym who is gone blind, old Sutcliffe who has not stirred from his chair since Michaelmas, the 4 widows in the almshouses by the church. It is not a great post, but it is honourable, and the cottage by the Lich Gate would be yours rent-free with a small fire allowance from the parish chest. I have come first to you." Letitia heard him to the end with her hands folded composedly. "Reverend Yates," she said in her soft, warm, low alto, "I thank you with my whole heart for the kindness in which you have come. I would ask, if I may, a few days in which to consider it, for I would not give you an answer that was not the answer of considered thought." The vicar inclined his long, kind face. "Take what time you require, my dear. The post will be open to you when you are ready." He rose. She rose. Mr. Bartlett opened the great door, and the vicar was driven away down the beech avenue at a steady country trot. Saturday the 8th of March came in grey, with a thin cold rain upon the leaded windows. Letitia read aloud in the South Library, to the empty chair as she had done. The cat slept on the cushion in such pale light as the morning afforded. At 11, when Letitia had gone down to the kitchen with her teacup, Mrs. Crouch came up the back stairs to the small north-east bedroom with the under-housemaid Polly at her heel and a small cloth-bound inventory book in her hand. "The housekeeper," In her plain dark bombazine gown, with the high round neck and white linen apron and chatelaine of household keys at her waist, iron grey hair pinned tight beneath the small white linen housekeeper's cap, sharp pale grey eyes and narrow pressed lips, and small black silk mourning band upon her left arm, settled in her view that genteel companions were an indulgence properly concluded by the Lincoln's Inn letter, began to inventory the small bedroom for the next housekeeper clerk. She set Polly to counting the linen sheets and bolster cases, and herself listed the small mahogany washstand, the iron candlestick, the 2 chairs, the worn-edged morning rug, the plain hanging cupboard. Letitia returned at 11:20, paused in the doorway and saw at once what was being done. She did not speak. She did not protest. She did not, in any movement of the mouth or the steady hazel-brown eyes, betray that she had seen anything beyond a piece of household business that touched her not at all. She inclined her head 1/4 inch and said only, "Mrs. Crouch, pray do not let me interrupt you," and went down again to the South Library, the cat after her at a quiet trot. From that hour through the close of the week, she set her own possessions in steady silence in order, the 3 linen night-shifts folded in the leather valise that had been her mother's, the Bible and Book of Common Prayer beside them, the slim packet of her late father's letters tied in faded blue ribbon at the bottom. Without remark, without complaint, and without visible sign that she had felt the small particular sting of being inventoried under the same roof in which she had served 21 months. So passed Saturday, Sunday in the parish church, and Monday in its quiet rounds, and Tuesday morning, the 11th of March, came in cold and clear, with a hard pale blue sky over the Hampshire Downs, and at 4:30 in the afternoon, as the long shaft of cold pale gold sun slanted low across the long beech avenue, the sound of a pair of horses came up the gravel at a steady, honest trot, and Mr. Bartlett, who had been listening for it since 3, set down the silver salver in the butler's pantry and went up to the great hall. A pair of horses came up the avenue, a tall, clean-built bay gelding and a smaller dark bay led horse for the valise, and at the bay's near stirrup walked a tall, lean, grey-brindled Scottish deerhound, 9 years old, rough, wiry coat, slate grey, shading to silver at the long, noble muzzle, deep, dark amber eyes set steady on the line of the avenue, the plain leather collar at his throat, carrying a small brass plate engraved Ravenshaw. The rider sat the bay easily. He was 32. His thick, dark, mahogany-brown, wavy hair, deep, warm mahogany with bronze lights even in the cold March sun, was cut close at the nape and just brushed his coat collar, with one premature streak of pure silver above the left temple and one lock fallen across the brow. His clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, true grey-green, the colour of a winter channel under cloud, with flecks of dark gold deep within the iris, held the steady, considering gaze of a man long practised in observation. His fair, faintly weathered skin showed the years upon the peninsula, in the small fine lines about the eye corners, and in the faint shadow at the clean-shaven jaw, and a small, thin, pale scar high above the right brow, got from a horsefall in the Home Park in 1812, no war wound, stood out in the cold light. His face was strong and angular, high cheekbones, straight Roman nose, firm, grave mouth, strong, clean-edged jaw with a small dark mole at the left corner of the lower lip. His tall, lean 6'2" frame, broad-shouldered in the build of a light dragoon, sat the bay with the absent seat of a soldier home from his last campaign. He wore a dark, mulberry, superfine morning coat, buff waistcoat with small silver buttons, buff breeches, brown-topped riding boots of soft, good leather, a white cravat properly tied, On his right ungloved hand, the heavy silver Ravenshaw ducal signet, a raven over a sheaf of wheat, rested in steady weight. In the same hand he carried a plain leather riding crop. Upon his head sat a plain dark brown beaver hat. He drew rein before the great door at 4:30 exactly. The deerhound came to a stand at the bay's near foreleg and was very still. Mr. Bartlett came down the broad, shallow steps. He was 62, in his 38th year of service. Thinning silver-grey hair brushed back, pale blue eyes finely lined, fair pale indoor skin, holding the composed grief of the 4 weeks past, long, kind, clean-shaven face, tall, thin, upright 6-foot frame, very still in the plain black butler's tailcoat, white cravat, black silk waistcoat with small gilt buttons, charcoal pantaloons, polished black shoes. The small black silk mourning band lay upon his left arm. He inclined deeply. "Your Grace, welcome home." Adrian dismounted in one quiet movement, dropped the reins to the undergroom, and gave Bartlett his hand for a brief, firm clasp. "Bartlett, I am glad to see you." The deerhound came 2 paces and laid his long, noble head against Adrian's leg without a sound. "Hardy and I would be obliged for the household within 10 minutes, if it can be done." "It can, Your Grace." In the great hall, the household had assembled. Mrs. Crouch stood at the head of the women's line in her plain, dark bombazine, chatelaine quiet at her waist, Mrs. Doddington beside her in the dark blue print-cotton cook's gown beneath the large white linen apron, warm, pale blue eyes very full. Susanna Wilkes next, hazel eyes lowered, soft mid-brown hair in the neat low bun beneath the small white lace cap, small jet cross on its black silk cord at her throat, the under-housemaids and under-footmen in a quiet line beyond. Letitia stood at the women's end in her plain pale grey wool, with the white lawn fichu and small silver locket on its black silk ribbon, auburn chestnut hair in the low chignon at the nape, hazel brown eyes lowered, slender 5'4" frame upright, hands folded composedly. Persimmon, who would not sit in the line for any duke alive, was at her ankle. Adrian came in. He gave Bartlett his hat and crop, stopped before the line, and looked at them, at the older faces he had known since boyhood, at the new ones he had not, at the place where his mother had used to stand to receive him on his rare leaves in the years before. And he spoke, in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, 3 composed sentences. "I thank you each for the kindness you showed my mother to her last hour. The household shall continue as she would have wished. We shall speak in the days following of any matter requiring my notice." His sea-grey-green eyes passed steadily down the line. They rested one composed instant upon Letitia's lowered face and passed on. He inclined to them. The household inclined back. Then he turned to Bartlett. "A private word, in the morning-room, if you please." In the morning-room, the door closed behind them. Adrian set his ungloved hand upon the back of the small carved chair beside the writing table. He did not sit. "Bartlett, how does the household stand?" "Well, Your Grace, by the grace of God and your late mother's hand. We are all kept upon the establishment as her Grace had set it down, saving the upper housemaid Edith, given by Mrs. Crouch's recommendation a quiet retirement to her sister at Andover, and old Hopkins of the stables, gone upon a small annuity to his nephew's house in Petersfield. Beyond these 2, none has been retired. And my mother's reader, Lady Letitia Vance, of whom my mother wrote each fortnight in such warmth." Mr. Bartlett's pale blue eyes met his quietly. "She is to leave us at the last day of this month, Your Grace. Mr. Tyndall sent down a letter on the 28th of last." There was a silence of perhaps half a minute, in which the pale gold afternoon light moved upon the carpet. Adrian's strong, angular face did not alter. His thick, dark lashes lowered once over the cool, sea-grey-green eyes, and lifted again. He drew, very quietly, one slow breath. "Mr. Tyndall does not have the right of it. I had a letter from my mother of the 17th of January. I will speak with Lady Letitia after dinner. Make it known in the household, Bartlett, that there is to be no further packing on her account." Mr. Bartlett inclined, and his long, kind face moved very slightly with what was, in him, a great relief. "Yes, Your Grace." At 6:30, Adrian came down the great staircase in morning evening dress, a black superfine evening tailcoat, white cravat, black silk waistcoat, charcoal pantaloons, polished black Hessian boots, the mourning band of black crape on the left arm, 12 weeks for his mother, sat plainly at the upper sleeve. The late Duke's small mourning ring, a thin gold band with a single jetstone, was upon the smallest finger of his left hand. The heavy silver Ravenshaw signet was upon the right. The streak of silver above his left temple caught the candlelight of the wall sconces. The lock at the brow had fallen again. Hardy came down at his heel, the brass plate at his collar catching one small gleam, the deep, dark amber eyes set steady before him. He turned at the foot of the stair and went, not to the dining room, but along the south corridor to the south library, for he had not been in it since his mother had died, and he wished to be in it once before dinner. The long case clock told 6:45 as he set his hand upon the door. He stopped in the open doorway. The room was lit only by the cold blue last of the March daylight, and one small candle upon the writing table. Persimmon, 11 years old, with her warm ginger and black patches over the creamy underside, white paws and chest, 2 notched ears, large amber-yellow eyes now closed, lay upon the embroidered south-facing window-seat cushion. In the wing-chair beside the unlit hearth, with the dowager's small calf-bound Hamlet open in her hand, sat Letitia. She had not heard him. Her auburn chestnut hair caught a small copper light from the candle. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes were upon the page. Her ivory fair skin, with its faint, warm rose flush, held the pale March twilight. Her plain, pale grey wool, with white lawn fichu, was very still about her slender, 5'4" frame. The small silver locket on its black silk ribbon rested unmoving at her throat. She was reading aloud, in her soft, warm, low alto, to the empty wing-chair opposite her. She was reading Polonius's speech to Laertes, which the late Duchess had loved. She read, in the quiet authority of an eldest daughter long practised at it, "This above all, to thine own self be true." Adrian did not move from the doorway. He had been raised on his mother's Shakespeare. The line that followed was his without an instant's pause. He gave it, in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, into the composed silence of the room. And it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Letitia's hand stilled upon the page. She lifted her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes once to the doorway, saw who stood in it, and rose composedly, the small calf-bound book closed in her slender hands. The cat opened her amber-yellow eyes and lifted her head from the cushion. Hardy, at Adrian's heel, sat down upon his haunches and was very still. Letitia inclined 1/4 inch. Adrian inclined 1/4 inch. He crossed the worn turkey rug to her in 3 quiet steps, and she offered him no curtsy beyond the inclination already made. She had too much steadiness for it, and he saw in the steady hazel-brown eyes, lifted now to his, that she had. He spoke, in steady quiet. "Lady Letitia, I had been told just now that you are to leave us. I have come to ask you not to." She lifted her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes a little further to his cool, sea-grey-green ones. She said, in her clear, unhurried, soft, warm, low alto, "Your Grace, Mr. Tyndall sent the letter in good faith. I had begun to make my arrangements." He answered in the same steady quiet, Mr. Tyndall did not have the right of it. My mother wrote to me on the 17th of January. She wrote of you in every fortnight's letter for 21 months. The post she gave you was not entered in any household ledger. It was given by her hand, and does not lapse on Mr. Tyndall's clerical reading. I ask you, in her place, and in my own, to remain at Ravenshaw Park as a reader to the Duke for the year of his proper mourning, on the same terms upon which my mother kept you, with a quarter's bonus, added for the awkwardness of the past month. The decision shall be entirely your own. Take what time you wish. She was silent a long moment. The cat watched, unblinking. The deerhound watched, unmoving. The cold blue last of the March daylight moved a quarter-inch further along the worn Turkey rug. Then she said very quietly, "Your Grace, I will accept the post for the year of your mourning on the same terms, without the addition. The bonus you may keep against the parish poor. I shall begin tomorrow at 11 in this library, if it please your Grace." He inclined to her, this time more deeply. "It pleases me, Lady Letitia. 11 o'clock tomorrow." They parted upon the inclination. He dined alone in the small dining room, Mr. Bartlett serving, a clear soup, a plain saddle of mutton, a little brandied custard, a single glass of claret, and Adrian ate steadily and spoke little. Letitia, by her own choice, took a small tray in her northeast bedroom. She would not move into the family dining room until Adrian asked her again, formally, 3 days later. The cat ate the buttered biscuit from her hand. At 9, Adrian drew out a sheet of plain ducal notepaper and wrote, in his firm, even hand, one short line to Mr. Tyndall at Lincoln's Inn, that the dismissal of Lady Letitia Vance was to be considered withdrawn, that Mr. Tyndall was requested to draw up no further household clerical letters concerning her without express ducal instruction, and that he, Adrian, would write at length within the week. He sealed the note with the heavy silver Ravenshaw signet, and laid down his pen. At midnight the house was very still. He sat at his small writing desk, the candle burning steady, the curtains drawn against the cold March night. Hardy curled in a long grey brindle compose upon the hearth rug. He had taken from the bound packet his mother's last letter, the letter of the 17th of January, the close even hand a little weaker than the year before, and unfolded it again, and his cool sea-grey-green eyes passed once more, in the steady candlelight, over the line he had read 50 times in the post-chaise on his way home from town. "My Letty reads as your father read. She gives me the line before I have asked for it. When I am gone, she shall not be lost. Promise me, Adrian, she shall not be lost." He set the letter down, with a hand that was, in his own steady seeing, very nearly unmoved. He blew out the candle. The dark of the bedchamber settled about him. He had, in the 8 months since the Peninsula, in the 4 since his father's bedside the previous January, and in the 4 weeks since his mother's grave in the south transept of the parish church, not yet wept. The line he had completed in the south library doorway at 6:45 that evening had unsettled him at a depth he had not, until then, known he carried. The household fires had been relit on the Duke's quiet instruction the day before, and so it was that the south library of Ravenshaw Park, on the cold, pale blue Wednesday morning of the 12th of March, 1817, held the soft, companionable warmth of a hearth that had been laid at 6:30 and coaxed to its low, steady glow by Mr. Bartlett's own hand by 10. The fire spoke once in a small, dry crackle as the long case clock in the hall struck the 3/4 before 11, and Persimmon, the tortoise-shell cat of 11 years, warm ginger and black patches over a creamy underside, white paws and chest, 2 small notched ears from her kittenhood, large, round, amber-yellow eyes, opened those eyes a quarter from her habitual neat furled compose upon the embroidered south-facing window seat cushion, and closed them again in the manner of a creature who had decided that the morning was, on the whole, a satisfactory one, and required no further intervention from her. At a minute before 11, Lady Letitia Vance came in. She was 24, the second daughter of the late 9th Earl of Vance, and she had been the late Duchess Marjorie's reader and companion for 21 months. Her long, rich, auburn chestnut, wavy hair, a deep, warm chestnut with copper lights in firelight, was pinned smooth in a low chignon at the nape of her long, graceful neck, with small wisps escaped at the temples. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes, warm, autumn leaf brown, with small green flecks beneath thick, dark lashes, held the very steady, direct gaze that the dowager had loved in her. Her ivory, fair English skin carried the faint, warm rose flush across the cheekbones that had risen there with the morning's air, the faint scattering of freckles across the bridge of her oval face, and the small, natural beauty mark below the right corner of her lower lip. Her finely arched, dark, honey-brown brows were composed. Her soft, well-shaped mouth was at its quiet. She was slender and 5 feet 4 inches upright in her plain, high-waisted, soft, pale grey wool morning gown with long sleeves and the white lawn fichu at her throat, the small silver locket on its thin black silk ribbon at her neck, plain black wool stockings, plain black leather indoor slippers. She carried no book. The book had been chosen the night before. The Duke was already there. Adrian Sebastian Greaves, 5th Duke of Ravenshaw, 32, stood at the chimney-piece with one boot laid easy upon the fender and one hand resting on the marble. His thick, dark, mahogany-brown, wavy hair, just brushing the collar of his coat, with the one premature streak of pure silver above the left temple and the one lock fallen across the brow, caught the low firelight in its bronze warmth. His clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, the colour of a winter channel under cloud, were upon her at her entrance, and inclined a 1/4 inch by way of greeting. The small, thin, pale scar, high above the right brow, a horsefall in the Home Park in 1812, no war wound, caught the morning light. His fair, faintly weathered skin from the peninsula carried the faint, clean shadow at the jaw of a man cleanly shaven that morning. The small, dark mole at the left corner of his lower lip was steady. His strong, angular face, with its high cheekbones and straight Roman nose, held the firm, grave mouth at its accustomed quiet. He stood tall at 6 feet 2 inches, lean, broad-shouldered, in his plain, dark, walnut-brown country morning coat, buff waistcoat with small silver buttons, buff breeches, brown-topped boots, white cravat properly tied, the heavy silver Ravenshaw signet with its raven-over-sheaf crest upon his right hand, the mourning band of black crape upon his left arm. Hardy lay at the worn Turkey rug by his boot. The tall, lean grey deerhound of 9 years, slate-grey, shading to silver at the long, noble muzzle, his rough, wiry coat, warm with the hearth, the plain leather collar with its brass plate, engraved Ravenshaw resting at his throat. He thumped his tail once, in the small, economic courtesy of a dog who has known a person for a fortnight, and laid his long head down again upon his crossed forepaws. By the door, in the small ladder-back chair brought in for the purpose, sat Susanna Wilkes, the lady's maid of 19. Soft, mid-brown hair, pinned in a neat low bun beneath a small white lace cap, clear hazel eyes, fair, lightly freckled skin upon an oval face with a kind, quiet mouth, slender 5 feet 3 inches upright in her plain dark grey print cotton gown with white linen apron and fichu, the small jet cross on its black silk cord at her throat, plain black leather slippers tucked composedly beneath her chair. Her sewing basket was in her lap. A small white linen pillowcase, half-hemmed, lay across her knee. She had inclined to her ladyship at her entrance, and had taken up her needle again. She would not look up. "Lady Letitia," said the Duke, in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, when she had come to the wing-chair beside the now-lit hearth that had been hers in the Dowager's time. "I should like to set the rules of the thing, if I may, before we begin. And I should like them to be your rules and not mine. You are to choose the book. I am to listen. If at any time it pleases you that I read in my turn, you are to correct my pronunciation as you should correct any pupil's, without scruple and without apology. I have been 26 months out of practised reading aloud, and I shall be the better for the correction." She inclined a 1/4 inch. "Your Grace," she said, in soft, warm, low alto. "The book this morning is Tacitus, the Agricola. It was upon her Grace's table on the morning of the 2nd of February. I had thought we might begin where she and I had left off." "Begin," he said, and sat. He took the chair opposite hers, the second wing chair set close to the hearth, and laid his hands very still upon its arms. The cat opened her eyes once at the small movement and closed them. Letitia opened the book upon her knee, smoothed the page once with her thumb, and began. She read 2 chapters in steady, soft, warm, low alto. The Latin came clean and easy from her, the small, precise, unhurried Latin of a young woman who had been practised at it by her father from her 9th year. And the English rendering she gave from her own quick interior translation came as easy, with the small, quiet authority of an eldest daughter who has been reading aloud since the schoolroom. He listened. He watched, without seeming to watch, the line of her wrist where the lawn cuff lay over it, and the small composed motion of her thumb at the page edge as she turned, and the very slight movement of the small silver locket at her throat as she breathed. He did not interrupt. At 12:30, Mrs. Doddington came up herself with the tea, in defiance of any prior arrangement that this office should fall to a housemaid. She was 54, soft grey-brown hair pinned beneath a large white linen cap, warm pale blue eyes, fair pink-cheeked round face, kindly mouth, medium 5 feet 5 inches plump, comfortable build, in her plain dark blue print cotton cook's gown beneath the large white linen apron and white kerchief at the throat. She set down the tray, the small silver pot, 2 cups of the Sèvres that the Dowager had loved, and a plate of seed cake newly turned out, upon the small mahogany table by Letitia's chair, dropped a soft curtsy to them both, and retired in steady, fond approval. Letitia closed the book. The Duke rose and offered her tea with his own hand, as he would have offered it to his sister. By 3:30 of that same Wednesday afternoon, the South Library lay in a clean, pale yellow shaft of soft Hampshire March sunlight, and the Duke proposed a turn in the garden. Letitia took up her plain black velvet pelisse from Susanna's hand, and her plain black straw bonnet, drew on her plain black kid gloves, and went down. The cat followed them at a careful 7 paces. Persimmon had her own opinions on damp gravel, and would not be hurried, and Hardy fell in at the Duke's stirrup side as he had fallen in at the Peninsula. He showed her the Rosamundi rose that his mother had planted in 1782 in the small south corner of the walled garden. The canes pruned hard for the year, the small green buds just beginning at the joints. He showed her the small stone sundial, set in 1791 at the centre of the south-facing knot, with its motto, Sic Transit, cut deep upon the bronze. He showed her the bench beneath the great cedar where his mother had sat through the long summer afternoons of the last 20 months. The cat sat down at the foot of the bench and began, with quiet ceremony, to wash one white paw. "Your father's library at Vance Court," he said quietly, walking on. "What was kept there when you were a child? What is there now?" She was steady. "My father had 4,000 volumes. the Latin and the Greek, the French and the Italian, Shakespeare in the second folio, Milton in the first, a quantity of 17th century divinity that his own father had collected. After his death in November of 14, the entail fell to my cousin Demetrius, and the library was sold at Christie's in March of 15 for £980. I was permitted to keep my own writing desk and the small set of cowper that had been my mother's. Your mother, he said, died in childbed in the December of 97. I had been 9 months in the world. I do not remember her face. I have her hair. She touched, very small, the silver locket at her throat. My father read me the task when I was 7, in the south parlour at Vance Court, in the manner that he had read it to her. I have it by heart in places, even now. He did not press. They walked a turn of the gravel, the cat following at her 7 paces, Hardy at his boot, and came in at 4:15. He brought down from the second shelf the small green cloth-bound cowper that had been his own mother's, set himself in his wing chair, opened the task at the second book, and read to her in his deep, clear, quiet baritone for half an hour. She did not correct him. She did not have cause to. She was, however, watching his face as he read. By the next morning, the Thursday, the thing had settled into its shape. At 11 they were in the South Library. She read. The cat slept upon the embroidered cushion of the south window seat. Hardy lay upon the worn Turkey rug. Susanna sat at the small chair by the door with her sewing. Mrs. Doddington brought up the tea at 12:30. At 3:30 they walked. At 4 he read to her for half an hour. At 5:15 he went out for an hour to ride the home park with Hardy and Mr. Bartlett's nephew, the underkeeper. They dined separately. He took his solitary cover in the small dining room at 6:30. On Saturday, the 15th of March, 3 days into the arrangement, he asked her formally, in the small, steady quiet of his deep baritone after the afternoon reading, whether she would do him the honour of coming down to dinner in the small dining room thereafter, not as servant nor as governess, but as the lady whom his mother had kept by her every evening for 21 months. He had thought, he said, that his mother would have wished it. He was certain that he himself wished it. He begged her, if it gave her any pain, to refuse him without scruple. Letitia, in soft, warm, low alto. Your Grace, I shall come down on the next evening, and I shall thank you for the compliment paid to my dear Duchess by your asking it. From the Sunday evening, the 16th of March, she dined in the small dining room. She sat at his right hand. Mr. Bartlett, 62 in his 38th year of service, his thinning silver-grey hair brushed back, his pale blue eyes finely lined, in his plain black butler's tailcoat with the small black silk mourning band at his sleeve, stood at the sideboard with his quiet grief and his quiet approval. The under-butler waited. Mrs. Crouch in her dark bombazine with her chatelaine kept her thin-lipped silence in the housekeeper's room. The dinner was 3 covers and a remove. Mrs. Doddington had not exerted herself in 26 months and was exerting herself now with a soft, glad fervour. Letitia ate, sparely and well. She spoke, when he addressed her, in steady, soft, warm, low alto. After dinner that Sunday they went into the South Library by candlelight, with Persimmon asleep upon the embroidered cushion and Hardy upon the Turkey rug, and he took up the small cloth-bound first volume of an anonymous novel that had been published in the December, Persuasion, by the late author of Pride and Prejudice, which he had brought down from town in his portmanteau on Tuesday, March the 11th. He had been carrying it for her for 3 weeks, and had not yet dared to say so. He said so now, very plainly, by laying it open in his lap. He read. She listened, hands folded composedly in her lap, the small silver locket at her throat catching the candle gold. The candles on the chimney-piece burned steady, the fire purred low, the cat slept. Hardy lay with his long head between his paws. Once, at the line where Anne Elliot meets Captain Wentworth upon the gravel of Camden Place, she laughed. A quiet, small, composed laugh that was over almost as soon as it had begun, and that came up from her steady chest in the manner of a thing that had not been let out of doors in a long while. It was the first laugh that had been in the South Library in 26 months. The Duke did not look up. He read on, as if the laugh had been the small natural sound of the candle in the sconce, and let it pass into the room without disturbing it. Only at the bottom of the page, he closed the volume upon his thumb, and sat a moment in steady quiet before he turned to the leaf. On the bright, cold blue Tuesday afternoon of the 18th of March, with the sky scoured clean by a north wind and the first crocuses coming up in their small purple and yellow clusters under the cedars, they walked at 3 down to the small clear trout stream that crossed the south paddock under the stone footbridge, dated 1693. Hardy went on ahead, his long grey coat stirred by the wind. The cat did not care for wet grass, and travelled in a small reed basket on Letitia's arm, her amber-yellow eyes looking out from the basket rim with a patient civic disapproval of the entire scheme. Adrian carried the basket as soon as they were over the stile. They came out upon the bridge. He laid his ungloved hand upon the parapet. The water ran clear and cold beneath them, the small dark shadow of a trout passing once below the southern arch. He sat down upon the parapet beside her. He spoke very quietly. "My mother told me, in the letter of the 17th of January, that you read as my father read, that she had not heard a voice like yours since 1812. I had not understood, until I stood in the doorway upon Tuesday at 6:45, what she had meant." Letitia's hazel brown eyes were very steady upon the stream. The wind moved a small wisp of her chestnut hair at the temple. She did not put it back. She said in soft, warm, low alto, "Your Grace, your dear mother had a kind imagination of me. I read only as my own father read. Then your father read as my father read," said the Duke. "They had perhaps the same teacher." "It is a small possible thing," said Letitia faintly. A small smile passed between them, the first that they had shared. It was a small grave thing, no more than a 1/4-inch turn at the corner of his firm, grave mouth, and a 1/4-inch lifting of her finely arched, dark honey-brown brow. But it was a smile, and it was shared, and it remained in the air upon the stone bridge of 1693 above the small clear Hampshire trout stream until the wind from the north carried it away among the cedars. On the Friday, the 21st of March, he went up to London for a single night to attend a meeting of the trustees of his late mother's annuities at Lincoln's Inn. He left at 7 of the morning by the post-chaise from the great door, with Hardy looking after him from the gravel. He returned upon the Saturday afternoon, the 22nd, at 4:30, with 2 small brown paper parcels tied with plain white tape under his arm. He gave them to her in the small drawing-room before dinner. He handed them across with a steady civility that held no demand and no claim, only the small offered courtesy of a duke who had noticed what books she had and had not, and what paper she would prefer. The first was a cloth-bound copy of Mrs. Edgeworth's Patronage in 3 volumes, which he had heard her say at table the Tuesday before that she had not yet read. The second was a set of fine cream-laid writing paper, with a small pressed rose at the head of each sheet, made by a Bond Street stationer at his quiet instruction. Letitia thanked him in soft, warm, low alto. She did not weep. Her steady hazel-brown eyes held a small bright moisture for the space of a single breath and were steady again. She placed the parcels carefully upon the rosewood side table beside her chair, the books one above the other, the paper beneath them. She inclined a 1/4 inch. He inclined a 1/4 inch. Mr. Bartlett, at the door, dipped his thinning silver-grey head a 1/4 inch unbidden and went out. That night, in the South Library, by candlelight, with Persimmon asleep upon the embroidered cushion and Hardy upon the turkey rug. She read to him for the first time from patronage, at his quiet request. The small, clean opening pages, in her steady, soft, warm low alto, with the small, composed motion of her thumb at the page edge. And he listened, with his head laid back against the high green velvet of his wing chair, and his sea-grey-green eyes half-closed in steady contentment. The fire spoke once, the candles burned low. He did not move. It was upon the night of Tuesday the 25th of March, at midnight, that he sat alone before the South Library fire, after Letitia had gone up to her room, half an hour since. The candles were low. One upon the chimney-piece was burning down to its last quarter-inch. Persimmon was asleep upon the embroidered cushion of the south window-seat. Hardy lay upon the worn turkey rug at his boot, with his long grey head upon his crossed forepaws and his deep, dark amber eyes closed. The Duke looked for some quarter of an hour at the empty wing-chair opposite him, the green velvet, the small cushion at the back, the worn place upon the right arm where her thumb had rested through 3 readings of patronage, and did not move. Then he reached aside to the small writing table beside him and took up the small cloth-bound private commonplace book that he had carried in his coat pocket since the spring of 1810. A book of no consequence to any other living person, into which he had written in his close, even hand, perhaps twice in a year, the small things that had stood out in his own quiet to him. He opened it at the next clean page. He took up the steel pen from the small inkstand. He wrote, in plain English, a single line: "She reads as my mother heard her read." I had not known, until now, what I had inherited. He blotted the line with a small pinch of fine sand from the silver caster. He shook the sand off into the hearth. He closed the book. He laid it back upon the writing table beside him. He sat in the firelight a quarter of an hour longer, in steady quiet, his hands very still upon the chair arms, his sea-grey-green eyes upon the empty chair opposite him, and he did not yet know what he was to do, and he knew only what he had come to. The cat opened her eyes once at the small, quiet sigh that came from him then. Hardy lifted his long grey head once at the cat. The candle upon the chimney-piece burned down to its last quarter-inch in the small, composed silence of the South Library at 1 in the morning of the 26th of March, 1817, 3 weeks and 3 days since Mr. Tyndall's letter, 2 weeks and 6 days since the Duke had stood in the doorway and completed the line, and 4 nights, exactly, before the post-chaise of Lord Demetrius Vance would turn up the long beech avenue. The week that followed Adrian's small private commonplace line of the 25th of March settled, without anyone observing it, into the steady rhythm of an arrangement the house had begun to take for granted. The cool, clear blue Hampshire late March weather held. The daffodils had come up strong under the south wall of the great library and tilted their pale yellow trumpets at the morning light. The rooks went up out of the cedars at 8:30 in the same noisy spiral. At 11 o'clock in the South Library, Adrian and Lady Letitia Vance read the Tacitus together, she in the wing chair, he in the chair opposite at a respectful 3 feet, and Susanna Wilkes by the door with her sewing. At 3:30, they took the afternoon walk through the long beech avenue and back along the south wall of the rose garden, Hardy, the tall, lean, grey-brindle Scottish deerhound, ahead of them at his slow, loping pace, his rough, wiry, slate-grey coat, darker at the shoulder, the tortoise-shell cat, Persimmon, in the small willow basket Letitia carried, her warm ginger and black patches dappled by the bare branches. At 4 they returned to the South Library, and now Adrian read to her. Cowper aloud in his deep, clear, quiet baritone the long sentences of the task unrolling at a measured page a minute. At 6:30 they dined in the small dining room with 2 candles between them. At 8 they returned to the South Library and read by candlelight. He would lay his book down at 10:30 and rise. He would bow his half-inch. She would bow her quarter-inch. And the day was done. Persimmon and Hardy were now habitually together. The deerhound had taken the worn turkey rug before the South Library hearth as his settled afternoon place, and the tortoiseshell cat, having decided in the last week of March that the dog's slate-grey shoulder blade was the warmest cushion on the rug after the embroidered cushion of the south window seat, would, of an evening, step delicately down, cross the rug, and lay herself along Hardy's broad ribs, sometimes setting her small, pink-edged chin in the deep, dark fur at his neck. Hardy, with his dark amber eyes half-closed, would breathe out a long, slow, patient breath and stir not. The Duke, watching this once over the top of his cowper, had been moved to the smallest answering smile. In the upstairs sitting-room at the head of the south stair, after the afternoon walk, Letitia had begun, quietly, to teach Susanna Wilkes a little Italian. The girl, 19, with her soft mid-brown hair pinned in a neat low bun beneath her small white lace cap, her clear hazel eyes, her oval face with its kind, quiet mouth, her plain dark grey print cotton lady's maid gown and white linen apron and small jet cross at her throat, had asked the previous Friday what the long word in italics in the Mysteries of Udolpho might mean, and Letitia, in her soft, warm, low alto, had told her, and had then offered the half-hour of Signora and Grazie and Buon giorno. Susanna came each afternoon, sat on the small upright cane chair by the window, and learnt with the same quiet, steady attention she had given the late dowager. On Friday the 28th of March, there came by the morning post a short note from Bramwell Hall, 8 miles off, written in a clear, easy lady's hand. Lady Helena Bramwell, Adrian's married sister of 30, asked when she might call. She had heard, by quiet country roads, that he was again at Ravenshaw, and would be most grateful to come over with Sir Quentin. Adrian wrote back the same morning at his small writing desk in the morning-room, and said, "Please come on Sunday, April the 6th, with Sir Quentin to dine and stay the night." He sealed the note with the heavy silver Ravenshaw signet, set it on the small silver tray in the hall, and the boy carried it that afternoon to the post. So the days went, quietly, until Wednesday the 2nd of April. A hired chaise turned up the long beech avenue at 11:30 on the morning of that Wednesday, a cool, clear blue April morning, with the daffodils strong now under the south wall. The chaise was an ordinary post-chaise with a small lozenge and griffin device painted on its near-side panel. The Vance arms, the lozenge faded to a dull pinkish brown and the griffin's gilt rubbed nearly off, and a hired pair of tired bays in the traces. It came down the Salisbury Road from town. Inside it sat the man who had ordered it from the Wheatsheaf Inn at Andover that morning at 9 o'clock, after 3 glasses of claret the night before in the inn's coffee-room. He was 38. His sandy grey thinning hair was carefully oiled forward over a long narrow brow, his small shallow watery pale blue eyes set close above a fine straight nose, down the bridge of which and across the cheekbones ran the small broken veins of 2 decades of indifferent claret. His complexion was sallow, his chin weak and narrow, his upper lip long. The mouth, when he settled it before alighting, composed itself into an oily half-smile of practised self-importance. He was middling height, 5'9", with a soft paunch beneath the waistcoat. He wore a dark bottle-green wool tailcoat with worn gilt buttons, a primrose-yellow silk waistcoat slightly stained at the lapel, buff pantaloons, top boots with brass tassels, the brass dulled, a quizzing glass on a black silk ribbon round his neck, and a plain dark grey beaver hat. He was Lord Demetrius Vance, 10th Earl of Vance. The chaise drew up at the great south door. A boy ran out from the stable yard to the heads of the bays. Demetrius descended, drew himself a half-inch taller than was strictly his, raised his quizzing glass once at the great pediment in a gesture of practised town admiration, and trod up the worn, shallow stone steps. Mr. Bartlett opened it. The butler was 62, in his 38th year of service to the Ravenshaw house. Thinning silver-grey hair brushed back, pale blue eyes finely lined, fair pale indoor skin, long kind face clean-shaven, tall 6 foot upright and very thin. He wore his plain black butler's tailcoat with the white cravat properly tied, his black silk waistcoat with small gilt buttons, charcoal pantaloons, polished black shoes. The small black silk mourning band on his left arm sat in the soft fold of the elbow as it had sat since the 2nd of February. Demetrius produced from his waistcoat pocket a plain visiting card with the Vance crest engraved on it, Lord Vance, and laid it with a flourish in the butler's hand. "I am here, my good man," he said, with the oily half-smile, "to see my cousin, and His Grace the Duke of Ravenshaw, on a family matter." Bartlett's pale blue eyes considered the card a steady second. The long kind face did not change. He did not, though it was the customary form, turn into the hall to send the card up to Lady Letitia. He inclined the 1/4 inch, said, "Be so good as to wait, my lord," and crossed the marble hall with the card on its silver salver to the door of the morning room. He knocked. He went in. He laid the card upon the small writing desk at which the Duke sat. The Duke was 32. His thick, dark mahogany brown wavy hair, deep, warm mahogany with bronze lights at the parting where the morning sun came in, was cut close at the nape and brushed his coat collar. The one premature streak of pure silver above the left temple caught the light, and the one familiar lock had fallen across his brow. His clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, true grey-green, the colour of a winter channel under cloud, lifted from the page of accounts before him very steadily. His fair, faintly weathered skin, clean-shaven in the morning, showed the small, thin, pale scar high above the right brow from the Home Park fall of 1812. His strong, angular face composed itself into the firm, grave mouth he wore when he received unwelcome callers. The small dark mole at the left corner of the lower lip moved the smallest fraction. He was tall, 6'2", lean and broad-shouldered. He wore a plain, dark walnut-brown country morning coat, a buff waistcoat, buff breeches, brown-topped boots, a properly tied white cravat. The heavy silver Ravenshaw signet was on his right hand, and the mourning band of black crape on his left arm. He read the card. He set it down. He said, in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, "Show him in, Bartlett. I shall stand." Bartlett inclined the same 1/4 inch and went out. Adrian rose, crossed the morning room, set himself at the chimney-piece, the small silver bell upon the marble shelf at his elbow, and waited. Bartlett showed Demetrius in. The Earl came into the room with the oily half-smile already set, the quizzing glass swinging on its silk ribbon. He swept his beaver off in a half-bow. He was about to advance upon the chimney-piece. Adrian did not move from it, nor did he indicate, by so much as a half-glance toward the row of chairs, that any chair was for the use of the visitor. Bartlett took up his position at the morning-room door, hands clasped quietly before him, as a butler stood when a visitor was not to be long. "Your Grace," Demetrius began, with the half-bow completing itself and the oily half-smile broadening, "I am much obliged that you should receive me at so short a notice. I am Demetrius, 10th Earl of Vance, present head of family to my cousin, Lady Letitia, who is, I understand, much occupied with your Grace at Ravenshaw Park. I have come, in my proper character of head of family, to inquire what arrangements are in contemplation, and what, if any free settlement, your Grace would consider as compensation for her removal from a respectable cousinly home to a mere reader's post." Adrian listened in steady silence. The clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes did not move from Demetrius's small, shallow, watery, pale blue ones. He did not speak until the Earl was wholly finished. Then he said, in the deep, clear, quiet baritone, every word placed at the same measured distance from the next. "My lord, you have my answer in a single sentence. Lady Letitia Vance is no chattel. She is at her own disposal. If she chooses to leave Ravenshaw Park, she shall do so by her own choice. And you will have neither her nor any compensation from me. Good morning." The Earl's oily half-smile faltered the smallest fraction at the corners. He recovered it. He drew himself the half-inch taller again. He had not, he said, been informed of any such intention. He was, after all, the present head of the Vance family by the regular descent. The Earl of Vance had both the moral and the legal claim upon the residence of an unmarried cousin of the house, and in the absence of any clear arrangement, your Grace must permit me to remove my cousin to Vance Court without delay, that her reputation may be preserved. Adrian, in the same deep, clear quiet, did not move from the chimney-piece. "My lord, Lady Letitia Vance has not lived under your roof since November of 14, and was not asked to do so then. The protection of her reputation, having been wholly disregarded by yourself for 2 years and 4 months, is not now a claim you may put forward in this room. I have given you my answer. The chaise that brought you stands at the door. Good morning, my lord." Demetrius opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it a second time. He closed it again. Then, in a small, unsteady voice that rose in the closing words into a shrill thinness that did not consort with the oily half-smile he attempted to keep upon his lips, he said, "Your Grace, I shall consult my solicitor in town. There shall be a chancery suit." Adrian, at the chimney-piece, said only, "You are at liberty to consult any solicitor you may afford. Good morning." He lifted his right hand to the small silver bell upon the marble shelf and rang it once. Bartlett opened the door. Demetrius, the oily half-smile now wholly displaced into a small tight white compression about the long upper lip, gathered his beaver, took 2 stiff steps backward, then turned and went out. Bartlett followed him through the marble hall and opened the great south door. Demetrius descended the worn, shallow stone steps. The boy at the heads of the tired bays let them go. Adrian crossed quietly from the chimney-piece to the long sash window and stood at it with his hands clasped behind him. From there, at 12:15, he watched the hired chaise turn down the long beech avenue. Through the small window of the chaise he could see, very plain, the figure of the Earl, the small, shallow, watery, pale blue eyes screwed up in private fury, the long upper lip drawn back, the quizzing glass jerking once and twice in a small private gesture of frustrated rage against the leather of the seat opposite. The chaise driver flicked his whip. The tired bays broke into a tired trot. The chaise rolled away under the bare upper branches of the beeches and was gone past the lodge gates by 12 o'clock. At 12:15, Adrian came to the south library. Letitia was at the small writing table set against the west wall. Slender and upright at 5'4", her long, rich, auburn chestnut, wavy hair pinned smooth in its low chignon at the nape, the small wisps escaped at the temples, the clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes bent over the page, the thick, dark lashes lowered, the small natural beauty mark below the right corner of her lower lip moving the smallest fraction as she shaped a word. She wore the plain, high-waisted, soft, pale grey wool morning gown with the long sleeves and the white lawn fichu at her throat. The small silver locket on its thin black silk ribbon lay quietly upon the fichu. She was copying out, in her clear, well-shaped hand, a passage from the Berkeley sermons that Reverend Yates had asked the Dowager for a year ago. Persimmon was on the embroidered cushion of the south window seat in the long shaft of the noon sun. Adrian came to the writing table. He stood with his hands clasped behind him at his usual 3 feet. He told her, plainly in his steady quiet, what the Earl of Vance had said and what he had answered, and how the chaise was gone past the lodge gates at 12. He left out nothing. He added nothing. She listened. Her hands lay very still upon the writing table on either side of her page. The clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes were very steady. When he had finished, she laid the pen down quietly upon the small pewter pen rest. She said, in the soft, warm, low alto, "Your Grace, I am sorry that he came. He shall come a second time only at his peril. Was there any threat in him?" Adrian at his 3 feet. Only such as a small wasp may make in a closed library. Letitia, with the smallest dry, composed smile at the corner of the soft, well-shaped mouth. "I shall close the door." Adrian in the deep, clear, quiet baritone, the smallest answering smile at the left corner of his own mouth where the small dark mole lay. "I have closed it. He shall not come a second time." She did not lift the pen for a moment. She lowered her hazel-brown eyes again to the half-finished page and took up the pen again and dipped it and set the next word down. He inclined the half-inch he always inclined before leaving the South Library and went out. At 3:30 they took their afternoon walk. The cool, clear blue April afternoon was kinder still than the morning had been. The daffodils were strong now under the south wall, and the early tulips along the rose garden border were showing red at the bud. The cat lay folded in the willow basket on Letitia's arm. Hardy went ahead at his slow, loping pace, his rough, slate-grey coat lit with silver at the shoulder. They spoke of Cowper, and of an Italian phrase Letitia had set Susanna for the morrow. They did not speak of Lord Demetrius Vance. At 4, they read in the South Library. Adrian read Cowper aloud in the deep, clear, quiet baritone, and Persimmon slept on the embroidered cushion as the sun slid off it westward. At 6:30, they dined in the small dining room. Mr. Bartlett served with his usual quiet civility. He said only, as he set down the second dish, that Mrs. Doddington had begged leave to send up a small game pie. The cook, 54, with her soft, grey-brown hair pinned beneath the large white linen cap, and her warm, pale blue eyes, and her fair, pink-cheeked, round face above the dark blue print cotton gown and the large white linen apron, had made it that morning of her own accord. A small game pie of partridge and ham, of which the dowager had been particularly fond, sent up by silent country knowledge as a small offered grace at the news that the Earl of Vance had been sent away. Adrian said quietly, "Be so good as to thank Mrs. Doddington for me." Bartlett inclined the 1/4 inch. After dinner they returned to the South Library. The candles were lit upon the small round table, between the wing chair and the chair opposite. Persimmon had taken her embroidered cushion upon the south window seat. Hardy had taken his Turkey rug. Adrian opened Persuasion, the small cloth-bound copy that had come down by the December post, at chapter 22. He read aloud, in the deep, clear, quiet baritone, the scene at the White Hart at Bath. He read the long passage with the same measured page, a minute he had used for Cowper. He came to the line. He read it without lifting his eyes from the page, and without changing the steady, measured quality of his voice. "You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope." The cat, on the embroidered cushion of the south window seat, lifted her head once. Her round, amber-yellow eyes opened, considered the candlelight a long, quiet second, and closed. Letitia's clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes lifted once from her hands folded composedly in her lap, lifted to Adrian's clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, and lowered again to her hands. He read on. The chapter went to its close. He laid the small cloth-bound book down upon the round table at 10:30. He rose. He bowed his half-inch. She bowed her quarter-inch. The day was done. At midnight, Adrian sat at his own writing desk in the small north study. The candle was steady. The house was quiet. Somewhere over the home wood, a single owl had begun to call. He took a sheet of plain-laid paper, dipped his pen, and set out the letter in his clear, well-formed hand. To Mr. Henry Tyndall, of Lincoln's Inn, London, from Adrian Greaves, Duke of Ravenshaw, at Ravenshaw Park, Hampshire. Dated Wednesday, the 2nd of April, 1817, at the close of day. He requested, in 3 short, civil ducal sentences, that Mr. Tyndall ride down to Ravenshaw Park on the soonest convenience, and that he bring with him, first, the late Dowager Duchess of Ravenshaw's full annuity ledger, including all personal arrangement schedules of the last 3 years, and second, the inheritance schedule of the late 9th Earl of Vance, and the entail accounts of the present 10th Earl, insofar as they might be publicly available at Doctors' Commons. He signed it Ravenshaw. He folded the sheet, sealed it with the heavy silver signet in plain dark wax, and laid it upon the small letter tray for the morning post. At 1:15, he went up the south stair to his own bedroom. He set the candle on the small table by the bed. Beside the brown leather Tacitus laid there the previous evening, and opened the long sash window upon the home park. The cool April air came in. He could smell the cedars. The single owl in the home wood called once, low and clear. He stood at the open window with his hands clasped behind him and looked south over the dark home park. He thought of his mother's letter of the 17th of January. "Promise me, Adrian, she shall not be lost," and of the small cloth-bound Tacitus on the bed-table, and of the way Letitia's clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes had lifted once at the Chapter 22 letter and lowered again to her hands. He thought, in the quiet of his own deep, clear, quiet baritone within his own head, that in the morning, when he had written to Mr. Tyndall, he had begun to ask himself a question to which he was not yet ready to know the answer. The owl in the home wood called a second time. Adrian closed the window. He blew out the candle. The tortoise-shell cat, who had come up the south stair behind him and slipped through the half-open door, was already settled, for the first time in her 11 years, upon the cushion of the small window-seat in his own bedroom, and not upon the embroidered cushion of the south library at all. Her warm ginger and black patches were folded under her creamy white underside. Her white paws were tucked one over the other. Her round amber-yellow eyes opened once at the dark, considered it a quiet second, and closed, the household, in the 2 days that followed the dismissal of Lord Demetrius Vance, settled again into the steady, measured rhythm by which a great country house keeps its dignity intact. On the cool, clear Thursday morning of the 3rd of April, 1817, Adrian rode out into the home park with his old grey deerhound at the stirrup at 7 o'clock. The long beech avenue lay quiet under the early light, and Hardy, with his rough, wiry, slate-grey coat shading to silver at the muzzle and his deep, dark amber eyes upon his master, paced beside the bay's near foreleg. The Duke was 32, tall, lean, broad-shouldered at 6'2", his thick, dark, mahogany-brown, wavy hair with its premature streak of silver above the left temple set in order beneath his plain dark-brown beaver, his clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes carrying the steady, considering gaze of a man whose mind was now turned upon a single composed purpose. He rode the same circuit upon the Friday morning of the 4th. In the South Library at 11 o'clock, the readings continued. Lady Letitia Vance, 24, of the Sussex Vances, sat in her habitual upright compose in the wing-chair drawn close to the unlit hearth, her plain pale grey wool morning gown with white lawn fichu falling smoothly to her plain black indoor slippers, her small silver locket on its thin black silk ribbon at her throat. Her long, rich auburn chestnut hair was pinned in its low chignon at the nape with small wisps escaped at the temples. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes were upon the page, very steady, the small beauty mark below the right corner of her lower lip composed in quiet. The tortoise-shell cat, 11 this Lady Day, divided her time now between the embroidered south-facing window-seat cushion of the library and the cushion she had selected upon the night of the 2nd of April in the Duke's bedroom. Susanna Wilkes, 19, sat by the door in plain dark grey print cotton with white linen apron and small jet cross, her sewing in her lap. On the Thursday afternoon at 3:30, Mrs. Doddington, the cook, sent up Mrs. Crouch's tea with a single seed cake upon the tray. It was a small composed civility, understood as such throughout the lower offices. For the Duke himself had spoken with the housekeeper upon the morning of the 3rd in the small back parlour, and had told her that the household clerical reading of the late Dowager's accounts, upon which Mr. Tyndall's letter of the 28th of February had been founded, was now superseded by ducal instruction. Mrs. Crouch had received the news with her habitual narrow lips, pressed thin and a composed, "Yes, Your Grace," and Mrs. Doddington had heard it from Susanna within a quarter of an hour, and had decided privately upon the seed cake. The tea was taken in the South Library. The small cloth-bound Hamlet lay upon the arm of the wing chair, where it had been laid since the 11th of March. At 11:30, upon the cool Saturday morning of the 5th of April, Mr. Bartlett brought a visitor into the morning room. The visitor was Mr. Tyndall of Lincoln's Inn, junior partner of the Ravenshaw family solicitors, 47, a tall, thin man of 6 feet with a slight scholar's stoop, his thinning silver-grey hair carefully combed back, his steady grey eyes behind small gold-rimmed spectacles, his fair indoor pallor and long, narrow scholar's face clean-shaven, his plain black superfine and white cravat, and black silk waistcoat and charcoal pantaloons and polished black shoes set in proper Inns of Court compose. He carried a leather-bound client's ledger in his right hand and a black japanned travelling deed-box in his left. Adrian received him at the chimney-piece, in his plain dark walnut-brown country morning coat, with the mourning band of black crape upon the left arm, the Ravenshaw signet of heavy silver with the crest of a raven over a sheaf of wheat upon his right hand, the small, thin, pale scar high above the right brow, from the Home Park horsefall of 1812, no war wound, just visible beneath the fallen lock of dark hair. He inclined a 1/4 inch. Mr. Tyndall inclined a half. Bartlett withdrew. "Your Grace," Mr. Tyndall said, in the steady professional quiet of an honest man come down upon a long ride, "I have brought what Your Grace requested by your letter of the 3rd, and one item which Your Grace had not requested, and which I had not, until this morning, seen." He set the deed-box upon the round walnut table by the window. He opened it. He produced, in the plain order of his profession, the late Dowager's full annuity ledger, leather-bound and clasped, a small bundle of personal arrangement letters in the late Dowager's own hand, tied in black silk and sealed, a copy of the inheritance schedule of the late 9th Earl of Vance, on cream foolscap with the Vance crest at the head, and the entail accounts of the present 10th Earl from Doctors' Commons. The personal arrangement letters, Mr. Tyndall said, had been filed in our chambers under the inscription, Personal, Dowager, sealed at her death, with instructions that the bundle be opened only upon the request of my senior partner, Mr. Bryce. Mr. Bryce, upon the 27th and 28th of February, was upon a personal matter at Bath, and had not been consulted before I undertook the clerical reading of the household account schedule, from which the dismissal letter of the 28th was drawn. I opened the bundle this morning at 8. With your Grace's permission, I shall read what I found. Adrian inclined a quarter-inch. He did not speak. He stood at the chimney-piece in steady gravity, his sea-grey-green eyes upon the solicitor's hand. Mr. Tyndall drew out the topmost letter. The seal was broken, the paper was creamy with the soft yellow of filing. The hand was the late Dowager's own, sloping and clear. The date upon the head was Christmas Eve, 1816. He read in the steady quiet of his profession. The Dowager's words had set down her wishes plainly. That Lady Letitia Vance was to be considered a permanent member of her household at Ravenshaw Park for so long as she should wish. That she was to be paid £120 a year and her board. That the post, being personal to herself and not subject to clerical termination upon her death, no notice of removal or vacation was to issue from the chambers upon any reading of any household accounts schedule whatsoever, save by request of Lady Letitia herself, and that Mr. Bryce was to see the letter opened in the event of the Dowager's death, that the household might be kept for the young woman who had read to her each morning at 11 through the 21 months of her last decline. Mr. Tyndall folded the letter. He set it upon the bundle. He raised his steady grey eyes to the Duke at the chimney-piece. A man who has discovered, in the plain quiet of his own filing cabinet, an honest mistake, may be known by the gravity with which he closes the bundle. Mr. Tyndall closed the bundle. "Your Grace," he said, in clear professional quiet. "The dismissal letter of the 28th of February was issued in error. I shall ride to the South Library this very hour and apologise to Lady Letitia Vance in person, with your Grace's permission, in the proper form." Adrian inclined a quarter-inch. He said only in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, "Mr. Tyndall, you shall." A quarter of an hour later, the solicitor stood within the South Library, the leather-bound ledger and the small bundle of letters held in steady hand. The cat lay upon the embroidered cushion of the south window-seat, her round, amber-yellow eyes half open. Letitia rose from the wing-chair as he came in. Susanna, by the small chair at the door, set her sewing down in her lap and folded her hands upon it in steady quiet. Adrian came to the chimney-piece and stood there. Mr. Tyndall bowed. He stood 3 paces from the wing-chair. He addressed Lady Letitia Vance in the steady professional gravity of a man who had ridden upon a single purpose, and he made the apology in 7 sentences. He said first that the dismissal letter of the 28th of February had been issued upon an erroneous clerical reading of the household account schedule, in the absence from chambers of his senior partner, Mr. Bryce. He said second that the late Dowager Duchess Marjorie Greaves had upon Christmas Eve of 1816 set down her wishes by a personal arrangement letter under seal, and that letter was, in plain English, that Lady Letitia Vance was to remain at Ravenshaw Park as a permanent member of the household for so long as she might wish, at £120 the year and her board. He said, third, that he himself had upon his own honour been the cause of the misunderstanding, and that no part of any blame lay upon any other hand. He said fourth, that he had ridden down from Lincoln's Inn that morning, that the apology might be made in person, in the proper form. He said, fifth, that he asked of her Grace her forgiveness. He said sixth, that he should write that evening from Ravenshaw the proper letter of confirmation to all parties. He said seventh, that the misunderstanding should not be permitted by anything within his professional power to recur. Letitia listened in steady, soft quiet. Her hands were very still in her lap. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes did not leave him while he spoke. When he had finished, she inclined a quarter-inch and answered in her soft, warm, low alto in 5 sentences. She said first that she had read his original letter in the spirit in which it had been written, as a plain professional notice, unattended by ill intention. She said, second, that she had taken no offence at his hand at the time, and saw none now. She said, third, that she was deeply grateful to her late dear Duchess for the kindness Mr. Tyndall had now read to her aloud, and had not, while the Duchess lived, been told of in those words. She said, fourth, that she accepted his professional apology in the simplicity it had been offered. And she said, fifth, that he should, that night at Ravenshaw, take dinner with the Duke and herself, that the matter might be done plainly and quietly between them. Mr. Tyndall bowed. Adrian at the chimney-piece inclined a quarter-inch in steady gravity. The thing was done. Mr. Tyndall took dinner at Ravenshaw that evening, 3 covers laid by Bartlett. He rode back to Lincoln's Inn at first light upon the Sunday morning of the 6th of April with the proper letters of confirmation already drafted. At 3 o'clock that same Sunday afternoon, upon a cool, clear, blue Hampshire April day, the Bramwell phaeton came up the long beech avenue at a steady country trot, with Sir Quentin Bramwell upon the box and Lady Helena Bramwell beside him and her maid up behind. The 8 miles from Bramwell Hall had been kindly to the horses. Bartlett met them at the great door. Lady Helena Bramwell, née Greaves, was 30, of dark mahogany-brown wavy hair, like her brother's, pinned in a smooth low chignon under a small white lace morning cap, of clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, like her brother's, fair, faintly freckled skin, oval face, with a soft, well-shaped mouth in habitual, easy warmth, slender at 5'6" and upright. She wore a plain, high-waisted, soft lavender silk half-mourning gown, with long sleeves and white lace fichu, a small black jet brooch at the throat, a plain gold wedding band, small pearl drop earrings. Sir Quentin Bramwell, 33, Hampshire baronet, was of soft, sandy brown hair just brushing his collar, clear, honest hazel eyes, fair, lightly tanned country skin, clean-shaven, kind, open face, with high cheekbones and a steady mouth, tall at 6 feet and lean. He wore a plain, dark green country coat, buff waistcoat, buff breeches, brown-topped boots, white cravat. Tea was taken in the morning-room. Letitia was present in her plain, pale grey wool, with the white lawn fichu and the small silver locket. Adrian at the chimney-piece in his plain, dark walnut-brown country morning coat, with the black crape band upon his left arm. Sir Quentin in the elbow-chair by the window. Helena upon the small sofa beside the heroine of her mother's letters. Helena's first words to Letitia, taking her hand in both of hers. "My dear Lady Letitia, my mother wrote to me of you in every letter for 21 months. I am happy at last to know the voice she heard each morning at 11. Letitia, in her soft, warm, low alto, returned the press of the hand. Lady Helena, your dear mother's kindness to me was beyond any small return I could make. I am the more pleased to meet you for it. Sir Quentin, who had been observing the cat at her habitual compose upon the embroidered cushion through the open library door, gave a small open laugh and said, Adrian, I had not believed Helena's account of the cat. The cat is, plainly, the cat. Adrian, in his deep, quiet baritone, with the smallest dry smile at the left corner of his mouth, answered, Quentin, the cat has consented to know you. Be steady. After tea, Helena drew her brother quietly aside and asked if he should walk with her in the rose garden. Adrian inclined. They went out through the south-east door together. The rose garden lay in the cool, clear blue April afternoon under a high, pale sky. The Rosa Mundi rose, the dowager's particular rose, was still in tight bud upon the trellis. The box hedge was clean and green from the frosts of March. The gravel had been raked the day before. They walked arm in arm, the brother in his country coat and the sister in her lavender silk. Adrian, Helena said, in steady, warm quiet, how long have you known? He did not answer at once. He walked half the length of the gravel walk before he spoke. Then, In his deep, clear, quiet baritone, after the small, composed silence, he said, "I knew, before I dismounted on the 11th of March." Helena, with the small, composed satisfaction of an elder sister who had heard the right answer, said, "Then ask her, Adrian. She will not refuse you. She has loved you since the night you completed the line." Adrian slowly, his sea-grey-green eyes upon his sister, said, "How do you know it?" Helena, in steady, warm quiet, the smallest smile at the corner of her mouth, said, because she did not say it, because no woman who reads aloud as she reads aloud will say it, "You will have to ask. Ask her on Saturday. Quentin and I shall stay through the weekend, that we may witness it." Adrian inclined a quarter inch. He did not answer. He did not need to. They walked back into the house through the southeast door at 5:15. On the cool, clear Monday morning of the 7th of April, Helena and Sir Quentin remained at Ravenshaw Park. Helena and Letitia walked the south garden, arm in arm in the morning, an hour together upon the gravel between the box hedges, talking in steady quiet of the parishes of Hampshire and of the dowagers last winter, and of the books that had been read in the last of the readings. Letitia, at Helena's request, taught Helena's maid one short Italian phrase upon a slip of paper in the morning-room afterward. Mrs. Annie Hamilton, a kind, round-faced Scotswoman of 40, with soft, red-brown hair beneath a white linen cap and warm hazel eyes, who took the slip with a small, composed curtsy. Sir Quentin and Adrian rode the home park together at noon, with Hardy at the Duke's stirrup. The cat tolerated Helena at 4 paces. At the breakfast table upon the cool, grey Tuesday morning of the 8th of April, a single letter was laid by Bartlett at the Duke's hand, addressed in a carefully oiled hand on cream-laid paper bearing the Vance crest, the direction reading, "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshaw." Adrian opened it. He read it once in steady quiet. The letter, dated London, Monday the 7th, was from Lord Demetrius Vance, 10th Earl of Vance, and threatened proceedings in the Court of Chancery unless Lady Letitia Vance was delivered to her family within the fortnight. Adrian folded it. He passed it across the table to Letitia, who read it composedly and handed it back without a word. Adrian drew a sheet of cream paper to him after breakfast and wrote, in his deep, clear, quiet hand, a single sentence to Mr. Tyndall at Lincoln's Inn, by return post. "Mr. Tyndall, the enclosed has reached me this morning. Please reply to Lord Vance directly with such elements of the entail account as you consider proper. Ravenshaw." Mr. Tyndall's reply, sent down by the late post upon the Tuesday evening for the Duke's information, was a copy of his letter to the 10th Earl of Vance. A single short professional paragraph noting that the entail accounts of the Vance estate were in arrears of £4,200, that no chancery suit could be commenced without prior settlement of those arrears in court fees, and that the matter, by the plain construction of the law, was therefore concluded. Lord Demetrius Vance did not write again. The reading rhythm in the South Library continued through the cool, clear Wednesday and Thursday of the 9th and 10th of April. Letitia read in the morning at 11 from Tacitus's Agricola to the Duke in the chair opposite her, and in the evening after dinner from Cowper's Task upon the small sofa with Adrian at the long window. Helena and Sir Quentin returned to Bramwell Hall upon the Wednesday afternoon at 3, with the firm understanding that they should return upon the Friday evening of the 11th for the weekend. The cat had begun to ride upon Helena's lap when Helena visited, having extended her tolerance by one further person. At 11 o'clock, upon the cool, clear Friday evening of the 11th of April, the Duke of Ravenshaw was alone in the South Library. The fire had been built up an hour before by Bartlett and burned now in small, steady flame. The cat was asleep upon the embroidered cushion of the south-facing window-seat, her white-tipped tail laid in its soft comber about her flank, her round, amber-yellow eyes closed. Hardy lay at length upon the worn turkey rug before the fire, his rough, wiry, slate-grey coat rising and falling in slow breath. Letitia had gone up to her own room half an hour before. Helena and Sir Quentin, who had returned that afternoon, were in the small drawing-room across the corridor, reading aloud to one another from the Edinburgh Review of March. Adrian was seated at his small writing desk, drawn close to the South Library fire. He was 32. His thick, dark, mahogany-brown wavy hair, with its premature streak of silver above the left temple, was set in steady order. His clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes were upon a sheet of fine cream-laid paper. The small, thin, pale scar, high above the right brow, lay quiet beneath the fallen lock of dark hair. He had taken off his evening coat an hour before, and sat now in his black silk waistcoat and white cravat. The Ravenshaw signet of heavy silver lay upon his right hand, his late father's small mourning ring of thin gold with single jetstone upon the smallest finger of his left. He drew the sheet toward him. He dipped the pen. He wrote, in his deep, clear, quiet hand, the proposal he intended to make the following morning at 11 in the South Library to the woman who had read aloud to his mother for 21 months, and to himself for the 4 weeks since the 11th of March. He wrote it through. He read it. He drew a fresh sheet and wrote it again. He read the second. He drew a third sheet and wrote it again, slowly, weighing each word. He read the third. He kept the third. He folded it carefully into thirds. He placed it folded into the inner breast pocket of his coat, where it hung over the back of the chair, against the place where his heart lay when the coat was upon him. He sat a quarter of an hour longer in steady quiet. He looked at the empty wing chair opposite him. He looked at the small cloth-bound Hamlet lying upon its arm where Letitia had laid it down at 10:30. He looked at the cat upon the cushion. He looked at the dog upon the rug. He had been happier in the 4 weeks since the cold blue afternoon of the 11th of March, upon which he had ridden up the long beech avenue and dismounted at the great door, than he had been in the 7 years preceding, and he knew it without flinching. Whatever the Saturday morning brought, whatever soft, warm, low alto answer she gave him in the wing chair at 11 o'clock, he would not lose what he had been given, because she had, by her own composed, steady patience, over 21 months in his mother's company and 4 weeks in his own, already given it. The fire fell a little upon the hearth. The cat did not stir. Hardy did not stir. The Duke of Ravenshaw drew the candle a little nearer, and sat on in the quiet of the South Library, with the folded sheet against his heart, until the long case clock in the great hall struck the 1/4 midnight upon the morning of the 12th of April, 1817. The morning of Saturday, the 12th of April, 1817, came up cold and pale blue over the Hampshire Downs, with a thin, clear sun laying itself in long, patient bars across the worn turkey rug of the South Library at Ravenshaw Park. The fire on the hearth was a small, steady fire of seasoned beech. The embroidered south-facing window-seat cushion of 1791, pale yellow primroses and dark blue forget-me-nots stitched by the late dowager's own hand, held a single sleeping shape, Persimmon, the late dowager's tortoise-shell cat, 11 years old this spring, warm ginger and black patches over her creamy white underside, white paws and white chest, white whiskers, 2 small notched ears, large, round, amber-yellow eyes presently closed in the pale spring sun, small pink nose tucked beneath one folded white paw. In the right-hand wing chair beside the small fire sat Lady Letitia Vance, 24, long, rich, auburn chestnut wavy hair pinned smooth in a low chignon at the nape with small wisps loosed at her temples, the copper lights warm where the firelight crossed it. clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes with their small green flecks resting upon the small book closed in her lap. Ivory fair English skin with the faint, warm rose flush across the cheekbones, the faint freckles across the bridge of her nose, the small natural beauty mark below the right corner of her lower lip. Oval face composed, soft, well-shaped mouth at composed, quiet, long graceful neck upright above the white lawn fichu. She wore a plain, high-waisted, soft, pale grey wool morning gown with long sleeves, the fichu pinned demurely, and the small silver locket on its thin black silk ribbon at her throat. Slender, 5 feet 4 inches, upright in the chair. Susanna Wilkes, 19, soft mid-brown hair beneath a small white lace cap, clear hazel eyes, fair lightly freckled skin, oval face, slender 5 feet 3 inches, in her dark grey print cotton lady's maid gown with white linen apron and fichu, sat quietly attendant by the door with her sewing in her lap, her needle moving slowly and well. The library door opened on its quiet hinge. Adrian Sebastian Greaves, 5th Duke of Ravenshaw, 32, came in. Thick, dark mahogany brown wavy hair, brushing his coat collar with the one premature streak of pure silver above the left temple and the one lock fallen across his brow. Clear, cool, sea grey-green eyes, true grey-green, colour of a winter channel under cloud, flecks of dark gold in firelight, went first to her, then to the cushion, then to her again. Fair, faintly weathered peninsular skin, clean-shaven, the small, thin, pale scar high above the right brow, strong, angular face, firm, grave mouth, the small, dark mole at the left corner of his lower lip, all composed this morning into a very particular gravity. Tall, 6 feet 2 inches, lean, broad-shouldered. He wore a dark walnut-brown country coat, buff waistcoat with small silver buttons, buff breeches, brown-topped boots, white cravat, the Ravenshaw ducal signet ring on his right hand, the mourning band of black crepe upon his left arm. He stopped on the worn turkey rug. He looked at her once, with the considering quiet of a man who has spent 4 months learning a face. Then, with the small, composed gravity of a duke, kneeling for the first time in his life. No flourish, no theatre. Simply a man lowering himself onto one knee upon the rug as though it were the only place in England left to him to kneel. He knelt. His left hand rested lightly upon his thigh. His right hand, the signet heavy upon it, rested open. He spoke in his deep, clear, quiet baritone, the only sentence he intended to say in proposal. Lady Letitia. I had not been in this library for 4 months when I came home and found you in it. I had not heard my mother's grace until I heard you read it to her empty chair. I have loved you, with what dignity I could, since the breath in which I completed the line. I am asking on the proper terms, in the South Library at 11 o'clock on the cold blue morning of the 12th of April, 1817, with your maid present, that you will do me the honour of becoming my wife. The fire shifted once on the hearth. Susanna's needle paused, very small, and resumed. Letitia rose from the wing chair, her hands she held composedly before her, fingers loosely linked. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes were very steady upon him. The small green flecks in them held the spring light without flinching. The rose flush deepened a degree along her cheekbones. The book lay where she had laid it on the chair arm. After a small, composed silence, perhaps 4 breaths, she said, in her soft, warm, low alto voice, Your Grace, I shall. On the embroidered window-seat cushion of 1791, Persimmon opened her large, round, amber-yellow eyes. That afternoon at 3 o'clock, in the morning-room at the south end of the house, Lady Helena Bramwell, 30, dark mahogany-brown wavy hair, pinned in a smooth low chignon under a small white lace morning cap, clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes, fair, faintly freckled skin, slender 5 feet 6 inches, in a plain, high-waisted, soft lavender silk, half-mourning morning gown with white lace fichu, small black jet brooch at the throat, plain gold wedding band, small pearl drop earrings, sat at her embroidery beside her husband, Sir Quentin Bramwell, 33, soft, sandy brown hair just brushing his collar, clear, honest hazel eyes, fair, lightly tanned skin, tall, 6 feet lean, in his plain, dark green country coat, buff waistcoat, buff breeches, brown-topped boots, white cravat. He had a newspaper open in his lap and was not reading it. Adrian came in with Letitia upon his arm. He fetched her gently to the rug before the fire and turned and said plainly in his quiet baritone, "Helena, Quentin, Lady Letitia has consented this morning to be my wife." Helena's needle stopped. Her clear sea-grey-green eyes filled at once. She wept a single quiet tear, only the one, and then laughed through it, the easy warm laugh that had been her mother's laugh, and rose from her chair, and crossed the rug, and kissed Letitia upon both cheeks. "My dear," she said, holding Letitia's hands in both of hers, and could find for a moment no other word, and then, my dear," again. And that was enough. Letitia, the rose flush deepened along her cheekbones, the steady hazel-brown eyes a little brighter, returned the pressure of Helena's hands with composed warmth. Sir Quentin had risen also. He came to Adrian and took his hand with the proper steady warmth of a brother-in-law, and held it the proper length of seconds, and said in his kind country voice, "The Hampshire neighbourhood, Ravenshaw, will sleep the easier for it." Adrian's grave mouth eased 1/4 of an inch at one corner, which was in him a smile. "I had hoped it might," he said. Helena turned to Letitia and asked very quietly the practical questions of a sister. When, and where, and what gown? Letitia answered them composedly. The fire on the morning-room hearth settled itself. That evening at 6:30, the household was assembled in the great hall under the long shadow of the staircase. Mr. Bartlett, 62, thinning silver-grey hair brushed back, pale blue eyes finely lined, long kind face, tall 6 feet, in his plain black butler's tailcoat with the small black silk mourning band on his left arm, stood at the front. Mrs. Doddington beside him, in her plain dark blue print cotton cook's gown and large white linen apron, her warm pale blue eyes already pink with feeling. Mrs. Crouch next, in her dark bombazine housekeeper's gown and white linen apron, the chatelaine of household keys, quiet at her hip. Susanna stood a little behind, her hands folded. Adrian, with Letitia at his side, made the announcement formally in his quiet baritone, naming her by her name and naming the day intended. Mr. Bartlett inclined his long kind head, with the steady grief turned, in the small motion of an inclination, to steady joy. "Your Grace," he said. "Her late Grace, I venture, would have wished it." Mrs. Doddington put the corner of her white linen apron to her eye and said, "Bless you, Your Grace, bless you both," in a voice full and brief. Mrs. Crouch's narrow lips were a moment unpressed. She inclined her head an exact inch and pressed them again. But the inch had been there. Susanna, who had known it 3 weeks, smiled small and quiet beneath her white lace cap. Upon the great staircase landing above them, persimmon, warm ginger and black patches over creamy white underside, white paws, white chest, white whiskers, large round amber-yellow eyes, 2 notched ears, sat watching the assembled household with the considering equanimity of a cat who had outlived 2 dukes and proposed to outlive a 3rd. The banns were read on the 3 Sundays following at St. Cuthbert in Ravenshaw village beneath the low square Norman tower of pale Hampshire flint. The Reverend Yates, 56, Soft, sandy grey hair finely thinning at the crown, clear, honest hazel eyes behind small, gold-rimmed spectacles. Long, kind face, clean-shaven, medium 5 feet 10 inches in his slight stoop, in black cassock with white linen surplice and white collar band and small silver crucifix on its black silk cord, spoke their names from the chancel step in his quiet country voice on the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th of April. The family pew was filled each Sunday. Adrian in dark country coat, Letitia in pale grey beside him, Helena in lavender silk, Sir Quentin in dark green. The parish women began on the second Sunday to bring white spring narcissus to the chancel. On the third Sunday, pale yellow primroses had joined them in small bunches at the pew ends. After the third reading, the Reverend Yates looked up over his small gold-rimmed spectacles and inclined his long, kind face once toward the family pew, and there was no more to be said. Each Sunday afterward, Adrian and Letitia walked back to Ravenshaw Park along the lime tree avenue together. The limes only just in green leaf, hardy at heel. The Duke's tall, lean, grey-brindle Scottish deerhound, rough, wiry, slate-grey coat, shading to silver at the long muzzle, deep, dark amber eyes, plain leather collar, with the brass plate Ravenshaw. Letitia's gloved hand rested upon Adrian's offered arm. They spoke very little. They did not need to. Saturday, the 3rd of May, 1817, came up warm and pale yellow over the South Downs, the hawthorn in white flower along the lanes, the Bourbon roses on the south wall at Ravenshaw budded close. By 9:45, the parish church of St. Cuthbert in Ravenshaw village, small 12th century Hampshire church of pale flint and dressed sandstone, low square Norman tower, plain oak pews, narrow lancet windows admitting the warm, pale yellow spring light, was full to its doors. Posies of pale yellow primroses, dark blue forget-me-nots, and white spring narcissus had been tied with white silk ribbon at every pew end. 2 tall brass candlesticks bore lit beeswax candles upon the simple oak altar. The Ravenshaw tenants and the parish villagers filled the chapel to the doors and beyond. The Reverend Yates stood at the altar in his black cassock and white linen surplice, the white collar band at his throat, the small silver crucifix on its black silk cord, his clear, honest hazel eyes steady behind the small gold-rimmed spectacles. Adrian stood at the chancel step in black superfine wedding tailcoat, high white starched cravat, white silk waistcoat with very faint silver pinstripe, black satin knee breeches, white silk stockings, buckled black evening shoes. The Ravenshaw ducal signet ring on his right hand, his late father's small mourning ring on the smallest finger of his left. A single sprig of pale yellow primrose pinned at his lapel. The black crepe mourning band had come off his arm 3 days before. The bare cloth where it had been was unmarked. His thick, dark mahogany-brown wavy hair carried its bronze lights and the one premature streak of silver above the left temple. The one fallen lock had been brushed back and was, now, fallen again. His clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes were upon the west door, tall, lean, broad-shouldered, 6 feet 2 inches. The west door opened. Letitia came up the aisle on Sir Quentin's arm. Sir Quentin in his black, superfine morning coat, white waistcoat, buff pantaloons, polished black evening shoes, white cravat, small sprig of primrose at his lapel, soft, sandy brown hair just brushing collar, clear, honest hazel eyes steady ahead. Letitia upon his arm, in the high-waisted ivory silk wedding gown, with short puff sleeves and a single narrow row of small antique seed pearls embroidered at the hem. Long, plain ivory silk gloves to the elbow. Her long, rich, auburn chestnut wavy hair, copper lights in the lancet sun, dressed in a smooth, low chignon, beneath the small coronet of pale yellow primroses and dark blue forget-me-nots, the very flowers of the embroidered window seat cushion of 1791, stitched by his mother's hand. The heirloom Greaves blonde lace, 1782 wedding veil, pinned to the coronet, worn at her own wedding by Adrian's mother to the late 4th Duke, lay over her shoulders, without hiding her face. A single strand of small antique seed pearls at her throat, her late mother's small pearl and coral drop earrings, the silver locket on its black silk ribbon worn beneath the bodice. Her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes, autumn leaf brown with the small green flecks, were very steady upon Adrian. The faint, warm rose flush along her cheekbones, the faint freckles, the small natural beauty mark below the right corner of her lower lip, slender, 5 feet 4 inches, upright. The villagers in their pews drew in a breath together and let it go. Lady Helena, matron of honour, wore a plain, high-waisted, soft, pale cream silk morning gown with white lace fichu, a small string of pearls at the throat, plain gold wedding band, small pearl drop earrings, her dark mahogany brown hair smooth beneath the white lace morning cap, her clear, cool, sea-grey green eyes very bright. In the front pew of the household side stood Mrs. Doddington in her soft, Sunday black silk gown with white lace fichu, beside Mr. Bartlett in his plain black butler's tailcoat with the small gilt buttons, his thinning silver-grey hair brushed back. Behind them, Mrs. Crouch in her best black silk Sunday gown with a small jet brooch at her throat, and Susanna in her best dark grey Sunday gown beneath a fresh white lace cap, clear hazel eyes shining quietly. Letitia reached the chancel step. Sir Quentin laid her gloved hand into Adrian's hand and stepped back 1 pace. Adrian's clear, cool, sea-grey green eyes met her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes and held. The Reverend Yates spoke his grace before the vows in his quiet country voice. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here this morning in the sight of God and of this parish, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony, which is an honourable estate, instituted of God in the time of man's innocency, signifying unto us the mystical union that is betwixt Christ and his Church. Into which holy estate these 2 persons present come now to be joined. Forasmuch as the consent of love has long since gone before them, let us at last hear it spoken in the open day. The vows passed between them in the proper form. He took her to be his wedded wife. She took him to be her wedded husband. The plain gold band went upon her gloved finger. The Reverend Yates spoke the blessing over their joined hands. In the small stone vestry afterward, the parish register was opened on its lectern. Adrian signed first, the dark mahogany brown lock fallen again across the brow. Letitia signed beneath him in her steady fine hand. Sir Quentin and Helena signed as witnesses. The Reverend Yates closed the register quietly upon his thumb. The bells of St. Cuthbert rang the half-hour above the South Downs. The villagers in the porch parted for them. The warm, pale yellow Hampshire sun stood at 10 upon the lime-tree avenue. The wedding breakfast was laid in the great dining hall at Ravenshaw Park. The long mahogany table dressed in white linen, posies of primrose and forget-me-not at intervals down its length, Mrs. Doddington's wedding cake, a plain English fruit cake under pale Hampshire icing with a single sprig of pale yellow primrose set upon its top, at the centre. Adrian and Letitia at the head of the table. Helena rose at her brother's elbow and gave a small, composed grace, brief and warm. Her sea-grey green eyes did not weep this time, though they were very bright. Sir Quentin gave the quiet country toast in his kind, honest voice to the Duke and the Duchess of Ravenshaw, and to the long good keeping of Hampshire, and the table drank it standing. Mr. Bartlett stood the long ceremony of it at the sideboard with steady warmth. Mrs. Doddington dabbed twice at her warm, pale blue eye with the white linen handkerchief, and then let it lie. Mrs. Crouch sat upright, her narrow lips composed. After the breakfast, Adrian offered Letitia his arm, and they walked out through the long drawing-room and the south door into the rose garden. The bourbon roses upon the south wall stood budded close, not yet open. The box hedges were trim. The gravel was warm. Hardy walked at Adrian's left knee, his rough, wiry slate-grey coat silvered at the long muzzle, his deep, dark amber eyes patient, his plain leather collar with the brass plate Ravenshaw catching the May sun. Beneath the arch of the south door behind them sat Persimmon, warm ginger and black over creamy white, white paws and chest, large round amber-yellow eyes, 2 notched ears, watching them go. She did not follow them. She had brought them this far. Adrian's gloved hand closed once, very briefly, over Letitia's gloved hand upon his arm. They walked the south wall in silence. There was nothing now that needed to be said. 18 months on the evening of Tuesday the 27th of October, 1818, at 8:30, the South Library at Ravenshaw Park stood warm and gold under a single low fire of seasoned beech and the soft autumn lamplight of a single trimmed lamp, its closed door holding the great quiet house at its proper distance, upon the embroidered south-facing window-seat cushion of 1791, stitched still with its primroses and forget-me-nots, slept Persimmon. 12 now, slower in her sleeping, the tortoise shell and white still warm, the white paws still neat, the 2 notched ears at peace. Upon the hearthrug curled Hardy. 10 now, the slate-grey coat shaded a little further, to silver at the long muzzle, the deep, dark amber eyes half closed, the brass plate Ravenshaw catching the firelight. In her usual right-hand wing-chair sat the 5th Duchess of Ravenshaw, Letitia, in a plain, high-waisted, soft, warm amber silk evening gown with long sleeves and a white lace fichu. The silver locket at her throat upon its thin black silk ribbon, the plain gold wedding band upon her finger, the small pearl and coral drop earrings at her ears, her long, rich auburn chestnut wavy hair pinned smooth in its low chignon, her clear, soft, hazel-brown eyes, autumn leaf brown with their small green flecks, upon the small cloth-bound book in her lap. And in the wing-chair opposite, his mother's old chair, in which he had not sat in all of 1817, and which, after the wedding, he had asked his wife whether he might sit in, and to which she had said yes, and in which he had sat each evening since, sat the 5th Duke of Ravenshaw, 33 now, in a black, superfine evening tailcoat, white cravat, white silk waistcoat, charcoal pantaloons, polished black Hessian boots, the Ravenshaw ducal signet ring on his right hand, and his father's small mourning ring still upon the smallest finger of his left, the dark mahogany brown hair with its silver streak above the left temple and its one fallen lock, the clear, cool, sea-grey-green eyes steady upon her over the small cloth-bound copy of Persuasion they were reading aloud, in turn, for the 3rd time, while Mrs. Doddington's seed cake on its plain plate stood between them on the small writing-table, and the fire settled itself once on the hearth, and the great house was quiet beyond the closed library door. There are stories that begin with a kiss. There are stories that begin with a vow. There are stories that begin with a knock, and stories that begin with a hired post-chaise, and stories that begin with a Tacitus on a stone bench. And there are, quieter, smaller, of more enduring shape, stories that begin with a tortoise-shell cat asleep upon an embroidered cushion at 7:20 on a cold, pale blue Hampshire March morning, when a young woman of 24, with no near family and no fortune of her own, had been told the day before that she must vacate the great house by the end of the month, and a 32-year-old duke, who had not yet come down from town, had not yet learnt that what he had inherited from his mother was not the library, nor the house, nor the rose garden, but the woman who read in them. 6 days later, he came home. He completed the line. And in the spring of that year, in a small Hampshire parish church, the woman his mother had loved became the woman he had married, and the cat upon the embroidered cushion slept on through the bells. And so, on the warm, pale yellow morning of the 3rd of May, 1817, in the parish church of St. Cuthbert in Ravenshaw village, under the soft Hampshire spring sun, Lady Letitia Vance, who had been told one cold March morning that she must leave the only house in which she had been made welcome, became, by the patient, steady asking of a duke who had once stood in a library doorway and completed the next line of Hamlet, she had read aloud to an empty chair, the 5th Duchess of Ravenshaw and the woman his mother, in dying, had given him without speaking.